The Hidden History of the Human Race. Part
6.
You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels, demons, and monsters and serpents to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau. And we're recording this show a little early this week. We had some weird scheduling thing. There's like an anniversary or something, right?
Yeah, that's actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Laura and I have an anniversary on Thursday.
That's right.
And since we had something booked with Soraya from Where Did the Road Go, he couldn't do today, so we had.
Yeah, I was like, I can schedule this for Thursday. Not a big deal. Soraya, I was like, I always try to ask Kyle, but I was like, every time I ask him, he's like, yeah, I can do Thursday. So I was like, yeah, Soraya, we can do it Thursday, and he's like, all right, Thursday the 20th it is. And then I'm telling Kyle, and he's like, so we have this like our anniversary on. So the one time I schedule it, it's like that's one day of the year that where Kyle has an anniversary.
Happy anniversary, babe. Wherever you are.
Yeah. And you guys are going to do some scouting?
Yeah, we're going to go check out Enchanted Rock and do a hike. And then we'll probably go to dinner in Fredericksburg. But the idea is we're trying to think of, meetup ideas for the Snake Force.
Yeah.
Where people can just show up and we can do something cool. And so we're going to check out, we definitely need to go check out the gorge. I can't remember what it's called. Canyon Lake Gorge too, but Enchanted Rock's always been high on my list.
Yeah.
Really cool place. We've always gone there and gone straight up to the top and then down into the cave and crack and spend all day like crawling through that gigantic fissure in the rock. But there's some cool trails, right? So we want to hit some trails and see what they're like and just kind of get a better general idea of like maybe camping spots and other things that.
Yeah, we did camp there one time.
Yeah.
I think we, our group
But
of
course, it was like somebody else planned this to like meet us here and we show up in the dark.
And show up. That's right.
So this is really just like going there with these eyes because I haven't been in years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So definitely going there with these eyes. And I actually drove through that area months back, and I was just like, man, this is a really cool area. Just the granite outcropping just sticking out all over the place. And,
and it also has all the cool like native lore. The name Enchanted Rock.
There's
itself.
Some lakes there, so there's swimming. I mean, you can do rock climbing. There's all kinds of crazy stuff you could do, or we can just hang out.
Yeah.
So
many opportunities to glad, which is the whole point.
Yeah. So we're thinking of doing this around the area, just going and checking out these really cool places, within a couple hours drive, and then just setting up some meetups. Yeah. Where people that are nearby can come. We can do a weekend or something like that. And just get yourself there, get your camp spot, do your thing. And then maybe we might do something special for, I don't know, we've been kicking around ideas like we could do a big dinner at the end.
Yeah.
That's
possible.
Big barbecue or just something. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But mainly
we can definitely cook. If people bring a bunch of food, Kyle and I are both pretty good cooks. We worked in restaurants, so we could do a cook-off.
The other thing we were talking about was Tube in the Rivers. Somewhere around here. Yep. I mean, that's like an awesome, you can make, that's an all-day event.
Do a float.
And then go back and camp. Yeah. Hang out. Have Snake Bros talk.
Yeah. And we're also aware that this is much more difficult for those of you like on the wrong side of the equator or on the wrong side of the Atlantic or whatever. Not wrong, different side, other side.
You guys, what the hell are you doing over there?
So one of the things we're doing here is like we want to set up meetups, that are just they're outside of the contact of the cabin thing. They're outside of us going to these expensive locations, but just have meetups where we can meet you guys. It doesn't cost you anything except for you being able to get there and pay to get in the park and feed yourself. But yeah, for those of you across the Atlantic or whatever, we'll have to.
Maybe one day we'll come there.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll just do a meetup.
If we ever do a research trip over there or whatever like that, we'll just try to set aside a couple of days where we can have a meetup and everybody will know in advance and you guys can show up and we can, I don't know, dance around Stonehenge or something. But so Kyle's going to be checking out Enchanted Rock this week along with their anniversary. So that's really cool.
Yeah. That's, I think we're both excited. It's like, hey man, we're going to do a hike together.
Yeah.
You know, just get out.
You and Laura are excited.
Yeah, me and Laura.
I'm not excited, but you.
Yeah,
you
no, you're not invited.
I can't go.
Yeah, and then we'll go out to dinner in Fredericksburg or something.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty cool town. I mean, lots of places to get some craft beers, wine, and of course some decent restaurants. So
yeah,
pretty cool area. Beautiful part of the country.
Yep.
So anyway, and now space weather news. NPR. A minor geomagnetic storm watch. A CME hit Earth's magnetic field during the late hours of May 17th. Its impact was weak, lifting the solar wind speed by a measly 25 kilometers per second. A second, more effective CME might arrive later today, according to NOAA. Minor G1 class geomagnetic storms are therefore still possible on May 18th or 19th. NPR, Space Weather News.
Well, thank you, Kyle. God damn it. I couldn't keep a straight face. That was really well done. You guys are right. His NPR voice is better than mine.
There's some news stuff like this new culture of voice. I don't know what it is. Acting on NPR.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, you can totally tell it's scripted, but it's scripted in a way that's supposed to be a conversation.
Oh.
So it's like... So, Russ, have you heard about the minor geomagnetic storm watch? And then you're supposed to say, yeah, Kyle, in fact, a CME hit Earth's magnetic field during the late hours of May 17th.
Wow.
I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
Wow.
Anyway, I didn't come here to complain. Sorry about that. It's just...
I mean, we kind of do come here to complain about stuff sometimes, right? Well, I can do. Well, failure to launch. A new sunspot is emerging over the sun's northeastern limb, and it is crackling with C-class solar flares. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded this one, a C1.1 flare at 0209 UT on May 18th. This explosion hurled a plume of plasma off the surface of the sun, but not all the way into space. Most of the material fell back to the sun's surface. Low-level C flares are simply not that powerful. Stronger flares might be in the offing. This is a relatively large sunspot with the potential for explosive magnetic mixing around its Neptune-sized dark core. Stay tuned for updates as AR2824 flare turns toward Earth. And now, news from the front! Fucking, yeah, great.
You gotta have the jazz trumpet in the background.
Gotta have the trumpet in the background. That was perfect. All right, current conditions.
That came through.
That was good. Solar wind speed right now is 354.5 kilometers per second. And the density is 8.2 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 11. Neutron count today is rated as high, 9.3% above the space age average. And the KP index now is quiet, but the 24-hour max was 4, which is rated as unsettled.
You're listening to National Public Radio. So
that's your space weather news. I mean, there is another story, but we'll skip that one.
Oh, really? What's it about?
Earth's ring current glowing red. Let's see if I can...
What do you mean ring?
Earth's ring current. I'll go through it real quick here. Let's see. A CME struck Earth's magnetic field, sparking the strongest geomagnetic storm of the young solar cycle 25. During this storm, photographers in Canada noticed something odd. An arc of red glowing light cut through the Milky Way. It was an SAR, which are stable auroral red arcs. These were discovered in 1956 at the beginning of the space age and have been recorded by cameras and satellites hundreds of times since. Most aurora watchers have never seen one, though, because they are almost always invisible to the human eye. But look, check this out. In the picture, you can see it.
SARS!
SARS.
That's cool.
Yeah. SARs are related to auroras, but they are not the same. Regular auroras appear when high-energy particles rain down along polar magnetic field lines, hitting the atmosphere and causing it to glow like the picture tube of an old color TV. An old color TV. Do not tune your television set. SARs form differently. They are a sign of heat energy leaking into the upper atmosphere from Earth's ring current system. This kind of leakage occurs most often during strong geomagnetic storms. So there you go.
Man, so many, I don't know. So many features I never knew about.
Yeah.
Until we did a weekly space weather news
Yeah,
update.
Exactly. And you got to wonder what we're missing because I only read it once a week and they have updates every day, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. So I promised to do this last week. This was from ScienceDaily.com. Science! That's right. This was all over the place, though. But new research uncovers continental crust emerged 500 million years earlier than thought. So it says the first emergence and persistence of continental crust on Earth during the Archean. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's like got 3 vowels and 4 billion.
Archean,
yeah, 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago. It has important implications for plate tectonics, ocean chemistry, and biological evolution. It happened about 500 million years earlier than previously thought, according to new research being presented at the EGU General Assembly in 2021. So basically, they found barite, Barite, a different mineral which is a signature for how old things can be, because this mineral doesn't change. Right? There's these various minerals that they use to kind of like they get these really old pieces of crust. And they're looking for these specific minerals that they have like known decay rates or something like that to kind of give them an idea of like how long it's been around.
Yeah. Watcher, can you pull up something about barite while Kyle's going through this?
I mean, it does explain it in the story, but just to give you the basic.
Pull it up anyway, Watcher.
Yeah, so it says barite forms from a combination of sulfate coming from ocean water mixing with barium from hydrothermal vents. Barite holds a robust record of ocean chemistry within its structure, useful for reconstructing ancient environments. The composition of the piece of barite we picked up in the field now that has been on Earth for 3.5 billion years is exactly the same as it was when it actually precipitated, says Desiree Roerdink, a geochemist at University of Bergen, Norway, and a team leader of the new research. So in essence, it is really a great recorder to look at processes on the early Earth. Roerdink and her team tested 6 different deposits on 3 different continents, ranging from about 3.2 billion to 3.5 billion years old. They calculated the ratio of strontium isotopes in the barite, and from there inferred with the time where the weathered continental rock made its way to the ocean and incorporated itself into the barite. Based on the data captured in the barite, they found that weathering started about 3.7 billion years ago, about 500 million years earlier than previously thought. That is a huge time period, Roerdink says. It essentially has implications for the way that we think about how life evolved. She added that scientists usually think about life starting in deep sea hydrothermal settings, but the biosphere is complex. We don't really know if it is possible that life could have developed at the same time on land. She noted, adding, but then that land has to be there.
Yeah. The weathering can't start without the land already existing.
That's right.
Because it has to be above.
It has to be
subaerial.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lastly, the emergence of land says something about plate tectonics and the early emergence of a geodynamic Earth. To get land, you need processes operating to form that continental crust and form a crust that is chemically different from the oceanic crust.
Okay.
So, yeah, basically just what you were saying.
Yeah.
It's going to be chemically different because it's subaerial.
Yeah. Watchers posted a couple of pictures of crystals.
It's interesting that they're, not only has it pushed the formation of the crust back, but they're looking at the implications that this may have on, the
timelines.
Standard model of the development of life and the idea that it developed in the ocean first.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. That this could you know, it's like opening up the possibility. Well, you know, did it develop? Could it have developed on land?
Yeah.
So I thought that's kind
really
of
cool.
an apt article for this book report.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention real quick that
500 million years.
Yeah,
I mean, damn,
that's a long time.
that is a long time.
Yeah.
Things just
I want to know what the
keep
margins
getting
of
older.
error are. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Things keep getting older, including the formation of the crust.
That's right.
I wonder what the margins of error are in that kind of geochemical dating technique. But anyway, I was listening to a planetary scientist earlier this week talk. I mean, I guess it was yesterday because, talk about the formation of crusts on various planets. And we may have mentioned this before on the show, but apparently Earth is very unique, even in the solar system, in the fact that it has tectonic plates that move around. So far, as far as they know, no other planet or moon in the solar system has this system. I just thought that was really interesting. That most of the other planets, if they're not gaseous, you know, like the moons, even all the moons for gas giants, they have a single crust and it's very hard. And they were talking about how that makes it stagnant, like the fact that Earth has tectonic plates that move around, have fissures, and it's volcanically active, means that it can recycle surface materials and the surface never becomes stagnant.
It's almost as though the Earth was impregnated.
Yeah.
Right. It's like an analogy.
Yeah.
Because
it's a cracking egg.
Yeah, but it's these two gigantic lumps that are inside, right? That they're thinking maybe from some protoplanet or whatever that
they make it unstable and
so it was like this impact destabilized the planet, and essentially from that gives you the environment where life can exist.
Yeah, it has to be dynamic.
There's enough there's enough change to make it possible. So it's
so you know what I started to think of was, again, going back to the very ancient symbols of two circles.
Yeah.
On the right is order and on the left is chaos. And only where they intersect in the middle there, where you have both of them, enough order for there to be, you know, time where you can do stuff, but enough chaos for things to change so that things can happen.
And this is an ancient symbol called the Vesica Piscis.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. That's really cool. And it's you know, just thinking about this, following that line of reasoning. What does that suggest about evolution, too? It's just like evolution requires a dynamic system.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So, you know, it's almost like the chicken and the egg problem. Like if you had a stable system, it seems like evolution in the standard model sense would have an easier time, right? Developing, adapting.
Right, because there's no catastrophic changes.
Right.
Yeah.
But because of that dynamic system, the life has to get better, has to change. There have to be, there are these alterations, and so things progress. It's like,
you have punctuated
you throw in a little bit of that chaos and you get progression, you get advancement.
Yeah. And most of the time the chaos is minimal, but that's evened out by short periods of intense amounts of chaos.
Yeah. And apparently, according to the fossil record, intense amounts of reordering of life.
Yeah, exactly. That's why. So punctuated equilibrium, including in the evolutionary process. Yeah.
Very cool stuff.
Yeah. All right. So we didn't start the timer. That's all right.
18 minutes.
Okay. Good. Well, that gives us time here. So last week, I completely forgot to address the questions that we got through the Discord. So I was going to do it this week. First question from Eric. Question: why doesn't the Watcher do space weather news since he's always in space?
Hold on a second.
I think that's a great question. See if the Watcher has an answer for it.
I don't have enough distance from the space weather to have good perspective.
That's what I was thinking too. I mean, when you're in the space weather, it's hard to do the weather. Ooh, that smells good. What tobacco is that? The Mark Twain?
This is Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah.
The last of it.
The last of it.
I am smoking the pipe because I forgot to buy vape pods.
Yeah.
But it is, it's nice to have a pipe from time to time.
Yeah. All right, this is from Patrick. He said, I'd love to hear you two discuss a solution to the perplexity that is this book. And not just lamenting the fact that science seems to be kind of broken. That's my job, and I have it locked all the way down. Like, if you were the czar of the world but couldn't change human nature, how would you attack the system that currently denigrates radical thinking, particularly in relation to this topic? Man.
Start a podcast.
But if we were like, you know, the czar of the world, right? If we ran the planet, you run like a totalitarian government over the entire planet, but you can't change human nature. How would you fix this problem? You know, like, in other words, if you were king. I thought about this. So
did you?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it.
How long did you have to think about it?
All week.
Well, then let me give my idea
All right,
first.
go for it.
Because I just got this question.
Watcher also has an answer, so we can let him do it too.
This is basically the incentive for, you got to follow the money is essentially what I think, right? Follow the money.
Yep.
So as the czar of the world, I would just free up the world, right? If I was a totalitarian ruler, then they would want to produce whatever studies that they think that I wanted.
Yeah.
And then that would screw up the process.
Yep. Yep.
Right? So that's like the extreme end.
Yeah.
So where we are right now is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
There's like the free process, which is just you're free to study and whatever. People can pay for that or not. And then there's the other extreme, which is like completely controlled. So it's like we're somewhere in there.
Right.
And a lot of money is coming from a government, and there's political forces involved. And that's, you know, not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
For the advancement of science.
Yep.
So it's, I don't know if you can change that even with, it's like, yeah, it's not, not really a solution.
Well, no. Okay. But that's part of what I was going to say too, is that I'm not sure that this can be fixed with I'm the king of the world.
That's what I mean. Position. Yeah. The best way to fix it would be to free up the world.
All right. Watcher, what do you got? Let's hear what you got, buddy.
So yeah, the czar thing, it kind of only fixes it until Kyle dies, and then it goes back to shit, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's right, until his son takes over and he's like,
I am king of the world.
More wine.
Yeah, Soul could pull it off. I'm not as scared then. But my thought on this is, so first off, we have a system that was built by scriptards to reward scriptard behavior. So they feed into each other like, oh, yes, look at this paper. It says exactly what it's supposed to. Somebody give them some grant money. You know, like it. Yep. You have to change that. And the only way I can think of, and this sounds really, really ridiculous, but I think it could work, make grant awarding like the way we vote for an MVP in basketball. You have all the fans, all the coaches, and the other players look at all their work for the year, and then they all vote. Whoever places at the top and, you know, the rest of the way down, you give them money based on that. Merit
and the fans are included in that? It's not just the players? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fans can send in votes. I think player votes and coach votes are like weighted a little bit heavier, but there's millions more fan votes, so it equals out.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so part of the solution seems to be like, and I've heard people say this, like prominent scientists, Avi Loeb for one, I know said this, because and Eric Weinstein talks about this too, he says that the system is broken, horribly, terribly broken. So both of them are really smart guys, and they haven't come up with a way to fix it yet. So I'm definitely not going to be able to. The three of us are definitely not going to be able to, Patrick. But some of the things that Avi said were interesting, and that's kind of what Brett is getting at. Avi thinks that he's like, look, so much of science now is funded by taxpayer dollars.
That's what I'm talking about.
The taxpayers should have a say in what we're studying. And if the taxpayers are interested in, for example, Oumuamua possibly being an alien artifact, then we should be looking at that stuff or trying to find more of them or whatever. You know, he's like, look, the public is paying for a lot of us to do science. Therefore, the public should have some kind of say.
But they're laymen. They don't know anything.
Right. So we have to get rid of that. My solution, not a solution, but a step in the right direction, I think, would be to remove the anonymous aspect of peer review. I feel like that people who write a paper and then that paper is submitted to anonymous other experts who can turn it down if they want to, and then it doesn't get published, that should be stopped. I feel like the people who write the paper should have a chance to respond to these anonymous experts. In other words, you know, you're getting criticized by somebody who you have no recourse to. I feel like that's a bad system. That, you know,
I would add that if a astrophysicist can be treated as if he is an expert with regard to like psychological experiences that are pan-global, I'm totally qualified to make an expert statement on how much a unicorn farts in zero G, like, and how much glitter comes out. Like, it's absolute nonsense.
Right.
That's the other part of it. The rules apply to everybody else except for those inside the community. And I don't know how you break that.
Yeah.
But,
and
so
like
that's another part of it.
Another thing, I'll just pull up a Feynman quote. Science is supposed to be, I'll change it a little bit. Science is supposed to be about the belief in the ignorance of experts. In other words, the reason we do science is because we don't know stuff. Right? But it's been turned into this, like, if you're a scientist, you're some kind of expert. No, you get into science because you don't know things and you want to expand.
And you realize that you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no solutions, but all of these suggestions are possible things.
Don't know of a solution. But, I mean, going back to the idea of peer review, anonymity, and, you know, following the money. Again, it's like, this is taxpayer dollars. Who's deciding where that money goes? You know, it just, the entire university, this is for sure controversial, but the entire university system that's being essentially funded by the government, right? This is potentially a problem. Like, I can see that people would be worried about a problem on the other side. Like, if the government pulled all funding from the university systems, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We need higher learning. We need all that. So it's like, yeah, you want to have your universities to have money to do research and do all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, the people giving them that money, they have an agenda. Yeah. And that agenda works its way in.
Right.
So
and many universities, especially, well, this might only be I actually don't know this. Maybe it's only the like big Ivy League ones, but they have like these enormous endowments, you know, that fund them by the you know, the interest that they get. They don't have to dive into the endowments at all. You know, like Harvard has a gigantic one. Oxford, same way. They've got an enormous amount of money that they use, and it's called an endowment. You know, and these are part of donations. People buy chairs. Yeah. And that's why at these schools you have the chairs of various departments named after some dude who gave them a ton of money, right? Yeah. Or the building is named after some capitalist or some you know, some guy who had a lot of money, so he donates a ton of money when he dies to that school. So it's like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that is part of an older system.
Well, there are double-edged swords too. Like, you think about tenure. Yeah. Right. Tenure is a double-edged sword because you can get in and then you get tenure and then you just can't get fired. And you could be a terrible scientist. Yeah. Whatever. You could be corrupt. Yeah. But then you have, you know, people like Robert Schoch, right? Once he got tenure, he was free to be able to actually say controversial things and not worry about his career being destroyed, even though they tried to destroy his career.
Yeah. And it's like, this happened to John Mack, right? He was a Harvard psychologist or psychiatrist, psychologist. Yeah. And so he started looking at, you know, abduction cases, and he had tenure, and they tried to get him removed from the college. It failed. The attempt failed. Like, in other words, tenure stood up to that problem. You know, so in that sense, the tenure system worked. But you're right. You know, it also makes it hard to fire bad scientists or scientists who go bad over time. They might start out awesome and then they just go bad. Yeah.
So, and I would just say that to put this into a real world scenario, because none of the ideas that we're espousing right now can we actually do anything about or make them happen. But I think the real solution is already underway, and that is that there are people who are brave enough to do the research and even publish stuff on the research and fight against whatever the forces are that are trying to silence them. And you know, this book is a great example of people just like sticking their neck out and doing a lot of hard work.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems to me that there are a growing number of people questioning, I don't know what to call it. The just whatever this, you know, the status quo.
Yeah.
I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Prominent people are saying the system's broken.
Yes. And, you know, we've got a way to communicate with each other, the internet.
Yeah, they're trying to fix that too.
Yes, they are. But the point is that you can't make a solution by being the czar of the world.
Yeah.
The ruler of the world.
Yeah, it's a saying. But, you know.
I know.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking it too seriously then. But
yeah.
But yeah, it's happening in a way.
I've got a kind of a good way to sort of sum this one up. I hate using it. Russ, you've said it before, that in a lot of ways, this Church of Science, the standard model, has become like born of this picked on academic nerd in high school who looks at the jocks and he's like, I'm going to control all of you someday. And so they go out and they seek these positions of expertise and respect and power, and then abuse the hell out of it and just, you know, make asses out of themselves. Well, the whole theory is based upon them having better information, more information, and being smarter than the people they're talking down to. And that's just not the case anymore. Like, I mean,
yeah, or if it ever was.
It was brutal what Graham did on Joe Rogan. But I mean, you can't talk down to a person who's more informed and isn't ignoring any of the evidence. And so it's bound to break with that regard in some point soon, I hope.
Yeah, you're talking about the debate between Graham Randall and Shermer. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Graham doesn't take any shit, that's for sure. And yeah, you know, I'm not sure that the ability to do good science, or we've said this kind of in a way, like we've talked about how, you know, the guy who is the kind of archaeologist who can go out there and dig things up with a toothbrush and categorize everything is not necessarily the guy you want putting the story together. You know, those two abilities don't necessarily go hand in hand. In some cases, with some people, they do, but
like Flinders Petrie, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like the difference between an experimental and a theoretical physicist. Those are two very different, very necessary, but very different.
Yeah, yeah. And it isn't necessarily that we want either of those two physicists putting together cosmology. You know, we just don't know. Like, some people, I don't remember what this was, where this came from. I'm gonna bring up a science fiction story again, but I remember reading a science fiction story where they had the concept of people they called spark plugs, and they were incredibly rare. This might have been well, I don't remember, but the point of it was that there are very rare people who can bring together expertise in multiple fields and come up with ideas that people who are focused on a single field can't see. And these are very rare people. But in this future civilization, they sought these people out because they were incredibly important to advancement. You know, and they were recognized. Like, here's a person who...
Is it called The Machine Stops?
No, I don't remember the name of the book. Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen similar things in different places, but you know, and it's a basic idea of a polymath, somebody who's basically has the same kind of expertise, but in 4 or 5 subjects that most people only get into 1, right? That kind of person can merge these different the knowledge from these different fields into ideas that are impossible to see unless you have the expertise in multiple fields. And so they would search these people out, and they're incredibly rare, but very well respected because they were always at the cutting edge of advancement in terms of technology or ideas or what things people could do. So I don't know if that's a solution either, you know. But all of these things are possible. Like getting rid of the anonymity in the peer review process, I think would be one. But Kyle's right. People like Firestone, you know, the whole Comet Research Group, they're pushing back against everything that's been thrown at them. But they're also a team full of heavy hitters. And
we're also, you know, we're just impatient because it's within our lifetime. And when you look back at the history of scientific development, like, you know, this is a generational a thing, a multi-generational thing in many cases. Yeah. And, you know, I'm sure there were, you know, like Galileo or whatever, you know, he's like, what the hell, right? But it's like, you know, he's dead. Yeah. But what his work, you know, led to the advancement of science.
That's right.
And so it's like, it may not happen. What I want to see happen in the scientific community may not happen in my lifetime, but there are little gains, you know, along the way that we see happening, and you never know what the repercussions of those things over longer than human lifetime periods of time will cause. Yeah. So ripples.
That's right. All right. This is from Smart. He says, if megafauna from Asia, such as the Eurasian cave lion, made it to North America roughly 340,000 years ago, and it became the American lion, but there is evidence of human occupation in China around the same time, is it possible that humans or some other kind of human made this same journey? And I'd say, yeah. And I think that's kind of what the book is pointing out, that, yeah, if megafauna made it over here, and this is part of the standard model idea, you know, that what became the American Pleistocene lion actually traveled from China, then so could have people, right? If a lion can do it.
Yeah. And if a lion was doing it, it was probably
they were probably chasing the people,
chasing food.
That's right. All right, from Black Shaman. Do you believe, if we assume the artifacts found and documented within the book are genuine, that from the earliest recorded Homo sape remains to us now in our current epoch, do you think they represent an unbroken line of human habitation? If not, what do you suppose happened, and how far down would we have to dig to discover the origins, or at least the first record of terrestrial humans? I wouldn't say they are an unbroken... Well, I mean, unbroken line in what context? Like, I'm not sure. You know, if this is the thing about like this out of Africa idea is like that one of the pluses that the standard model sees in that theory is it gives them a place for the human story to start. You know, and then they can be like, well, they spread out from there, and we can that gives us a beginning, right? This is kind of like this is the big bang of the human occupation of the Earth. And there are some people who have been discussing the possibility that this happened multiple times. In other words, out of Africa happened several times, and but only the most recent one succeeded. In other words, people spread out from Africa. All of those people who did that died out in some cataclysm or another, or due to disease, or they just never made it. And then later there was another out of Africa attempt, and those people didn't make it. And then we have another one, and those are our ancestors, right? But you always have this out of Africa possibility. But I mean, do we know that? Could they have come out of the Americas or out of Australia? Does there have to be a single origin point? I don't know.
Yeah, this is like so many other subjects on the podcast. It's like this does not provide an answer. It only provides more questions.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, this is how do we build the origin out of this, the evidence presented in the book? You can't. Yeah. You can only disassemble the story that we're taught. Yeah. Right.
That's right.
And yeah, that's a big question. Were they Homo sapiens sapiens? I don't know. Yeah. In some cases, some of the finds appear to be, but I mean, there's a lot more. You know, just with, you know, when you're dealing with cut bones and and chipped stone, it doesn't really tell you who is doing it, except that it's very similar to intelligent beings.
Yeah, that's right. And so this is kind of a question along those same lines from Matt in Delaware. He says, how do we know that the artifacts and tools covered in the book come from Homo sape?
Yeah.
Since Cremo did this work, there have been so many discoveries about other ancient hominids, Denisovans, how advanced Neanderthals were. Could they be responsible? Or is there direct evidence or reason to believe it was Homo sape?
I mean, the obvious answer is it was Nephis.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But yeah, that's my point.
Yeah,
you're making my point, and that's what's going on in my mind. Is that like, okay, I'm not immediately assuming that this is Homo sape.
Right. So the next section we're going to get into in the book, we haven't gotten there yet. There's still a few interesting, very ancient artifacts, and going back to Black Shaman's original or earlier question about how far down do we have to dig? Well, according to some of these stories, miles. I mean, literally miles. Okay. I mean, one of these stories is about, I mean, several of them they're finding things in coal mines that are miles down. So, is that how far you have to dig to find stuff? In that case, it was. And who made it? I don't know. The standard model says that some of this coal is 360, 470, 540 million years old. So who made those artifacts? How did they get down there? Is it really that old? Was it humans at all? I don't know. Could it have been Denisovans? Possible. We don't know what they look like.
But hominids. I mean, it seems
it is. Yeah, the assumption is that
because like you had pointed out in previous shows, that it's like, okay, well, this thing fits your hand. It's roughly the same size that we knew. Yeah, so there's a lot.
So it was either a hominid or a Lancepha.
That's right.
But again, so going back to Matt's question, is there direct evidence or reason to believe it was Homo sape? In some cases, yes. Like I was saying, the next section we're about to get into in the book is human remains findings. And those start out, and it's the same way that all these chapters do. They start out with the more recent cases, more cited and recorded cases, and they get more and more out there until you're finally in like things that are basically almost legendary, but nevertheless exist in the literature and are in some cases are incredibly old. But yeah, and a lot of the artifact finds that we read about in the book have associated bones, human remains found with them, jaws or teeth or a part of an ulna, like a piece of the forearm, and all of those, even that's a single bone, appears to be from an anatomically modern human. Does that make them Homo sape? I don't know. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay, final question. This is from Eric. This is a little bit off subject, but still cool. With SpaceX successfully launching and landing SN-15, bringing the dreams of humans to Mars within our lifetimes a little closer to reality, why do you think Elon has a fascination with Mars? A simpleton like me would think the moon would be the logical step for bases and then branching out. Does he know something we don't? Would you go to Mars given the opportunity?
I think
I'm not sure why he wants to go to Mars first.
Well,
I also think the moon seems to be the logical first step.
It's the logical first step unless you're getting billions of dollars from the government and they're like, the moon is off limits.
Yeah, stay off the moon. Right. That's you got to really.
I mean, I'm busting out my conspiracy.
Got a conspiracy guy over there. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
It's off limits, bro. And no, I would not go. I would not go to Mars.
One-way trip to Mars, sign me up. Oh yeah, and we did
because I would never actually get to Mars. I would only get inside a freaking spacesuit.
That's right.
There's no going to Mars, folks.
Yeah, you want to live in a spacesuit for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Would you like to go to a spacesuit real far away?
Yeah.
No.
How about we put you in a spacesuit and shoot you really far away? Do I get to get out of the spacesuit? Nope.
Yeah.
But now we found out there's shrooms on Mars. You don't want to go.
I've already complained about this, right? Like, we are not trying to figure out how to live on Mars. We're trying to figure out how to live in spacesuits.
Yeah, on Mars.
Screw that.
Yeah. Yep. And hey, this planetary scientist that I mentioned earlier that I was listening to, she was saying the same thing. She's like, you're not really going to be living on Mars. And there are way bigger problems with Mars than just, the thin atmosphere that you can't breathe anyway. And the total lack of any kind of supplies that we can use there. In other words, you have to bring everything with you.
Yeah.
She was like, there's also a massive radiation problem.
Do you want to go camping in the Sahara Desert forever?
In a spacesuit?
No, I don't.
All right. Thanks for the question, guys. Questions.
And we'll be right back.
That's right.
Pontificating on problems that are too big for our serpentine brains, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. As we get into part 6 of The Hidden History of the Human Race by Michael Cremo et al.
And Richard Thompson, yeah.
I couldn't remember that. Richard Thompson. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. Let's dive in.
And like one other possible answer to how we would fix this problem is how snakes usually fix things. Shed skin bail.
That's right.
That's probably what we're going to do.
Yep.
Which might mean go to Mars. I don't know. Shed skin bail.
I'm out.
All right. And I haven't been saying this enough on this series, this book report, but you guys should buy this book. I'm reading a lot from it, but not everything. And as we get farther and farther into it, I'll be reading less and less. That's just how it goes.
2 versions. There's Forbidden Archaeology, which has all the citations and all the reference material. And then Hidden History of the Human Race, which is the abridged version.
That's right. All right. Gold chain in Carboniferous coal from Morrisonville in Illinois. On June 11th, 1891, the Morrisonville Times reported, a curious find was brought to light by Mrs. S.W. Culp last Tuesday morning. As she was breaking a lump of coal preparatory to putting it in the scuttle, she discovered, as the lump fell apart, embedded in a circular shape, a small gold chain about 10 inches in length of antique and quaint workmanship. At first, Mrs. Culp thought the chain had been dropped accidentally into the coal, but as she undertook to lift the chain up, the idea of its having been recently dropped was at once made fallacious. For as the lump of coal broke, it separated almost in the middle, and the circular position of the chain placed the 2 ends near to each other, and as the lump separated, the middle of the chain became loosened while each end remained fastened in the coal. This is a study for the students of archaeology who love to puzzle their brains over the geological construction of the earth, from whose ancient depth the curious is always dropping out. I love how this newspaper's writing. The lump of coal from which this chain was taken is supposed to come from the Taylorville or Panam mines in southern Illinois, and almost hushes one's breath with mystery when it is thought for how many long ages the earth has been forming strata after strata, which hid the golden links from view. The chain was an 8-carat gold and weighed 8 pennyweights. In a letter to Ron Calais, Mrs. Vernon W. Lauer, recently the publisher of the Morrisonville Times, stated, Mr. Culp was editor and publisher of the Times in 1891. Mrs. Culp, who made the discovery, moved to Taylorville after his death, remarried, and her death occurred on February 3rd, 1959. Calais told our research assistant that he had information that the chain was given to one of Mrs. Culp's relatives after her death, but could not trace the chain further. The Illinois State Geological Survey has said that the coal in which the gold chain was found is 260 to 320 million years old. This raises the possibility that culturally advanced human beings were present in North America during that time.
That's just crazy.
Right. To me, the more we get into these where it's like incredibly ancient stuff, I'm just like, it's just not that old. Like, I don't know.
That's where I go to.
Why do they think the coal was that ancient? Because that's how their model builds it.
That's right.
Carved stone from Lay Coal Mine near Webster in Iowa.
Le coal mine.
The April 2nd, 1897 edition of the Daily News of Omaha, Nebraska carried an article titled Carved Stone Buried in a Mine, which described an object from a mine near Webster City in Iowa. The article stated, while mining coal today in the Lay Coal Mine at a depth of 130 feet, one of the miners came upon a piece of rock which puzzles him, and he was unable to account for its presence at the bottom of the coal mine. The stone is of a dark gray color and about 2 feet long, 1 foot wide, and 4 inches in thickness. Over the surface of this stone, which is very hard, lines are drawn at angles forming perfect diamonds. In the center of each diamond is a fairly good face of an old man having a peculiar indentation in the forehead that appears in each of the pictures, all of them being remarkably alike. Of the faces, all but 2 are looking to the right. How the stone reached its position under the strata of sandstone at a depth of 130 feet is a question the miners are not attempting to answer. Where the stone was found, the miners are sure the earth had never been before disturbed. Inquiries to the Iowa State Historical Preservation and Office of State Archaeology at the University of Iowa revealed nothing new. The Lay coal is probably from the Carboniferous period. So in that case, you have an object which, it has a human face on it. So you can't, they said it has a peculiar indentation in the middle of the forehead, which makes me wonder what that is about. But 130 feet below the surface, buried in coal, or is it coal? Let's see. Yeah, a coal mine underneath the layers of sandstone. They find basically a tile. It's the shape of it reminded me of a tile, but it's fairly thick. And one side of it's carved with a diamond pattern, and inside of each diamond is a face. And it's the same face, like it was
That's that's awesome. I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
But we can't.
Right.
Dang it.
An iron cup from an Oklahoma coal mine. On January 10th, in 1949, Robert Nordling sent a photograph of an iron cup to Frank L. Marsh of Andrews University in Berrien Springs in Michigan. Nordling wrote, I visited a friend's museum in southern Missouri. Among his curios, he had an iron cup pictured on this enclosed snapshot. Or I'm sorry, he had the iron cup that is pictured in this enclosed snapshot. So the guy's sending a photograph of an iron cup this person had. At the private museum, the iron cup had been displayed along with the following affidavit made by Frank J. Kinwood in Sulphur Springs, Arkansas, on November 27th of 1948. While I was working in the municipal electric plant in Thomas, Oklahoma in 1912, I came upon a solid chunk of coal which was too large to use. I broke it with a sledgehammer, and this iron pot fell from the center, leaving the impression or mold of the pot in the piece of coal. Jim Stahl, which is an employee of the company, witnessed the breaking and saw the pot fall out. I traced the source of the coal and found that it came from the Wilburton, Oklahoma mines. According to Robert O'Fay of the Oklahoma Geological Survey, the Wilburton mine coal is about 312 million years old. In 1966, Marsh sent the photo of the cup and the correspondence relating to it to Wilbert H. Rush, a professor of biology at Concordia College in Ann Arbor in Michigan. Marsh stated, enclosed is the letter and snap sent me by Robert Nordling some 17 years ago. When I got interested enough in this pot, the size of which can be gotten at somewhat by comparing it with the seat of the straight chair it is resting on, a year or two later I learned that this friend of Nordling's had died and his little museum was scattered. Nordling knew nothing about the whereabouts of the iron cup. It would challenge the most alert sleuth to see if he could run it down. If this cup is what it is sworn to be, it is truly a most significant artifact. It is an unfortunate fact that evidence such as this iron cup tends to get lost as it passes from hand to hand among people not fully aware of the significance.
Yep.
So that one kind of reminds me of did we already read the one about where they blew open the piece of rock and they call it the bell or the pitcher, the cup fell out and it was engraved with silver?
I don't think so.
Okay. A shoe sole from Nevada.
But it would have to be, I mean, what it's making me think of is the Iron Pillar of Delhi.
Yeah, no, yeah. Delhi? How did it not, yeah, and why are they calling it iron? Like, did they test it?
So it's some kind of weird alloy that doesn't rust and oxidize.
Yeah, and I mean, this was as recent as 1948. 1966 is when the photo was sent. The second time.
Yeah.
All right, a shoe sole from Nevada. On October 8th, 1922, the American Weekly section of the New York Sunday American ran a prominent feature titled Mystery of the Petrified Shoe Sole, 5 million years old, by Dr. W.H. Ballou. Ballou wrote, "Some time ago, while he was prospecting for fossils in Nevada, John T. Reed, a distinguished mining engineer and geologist, stopped suddenly and looked down in utter bewilderment and amazement at a rock near his feet. For there, a part of the rock itself was what seemed to be a human footprint. Closer inspection showed that it was not a mark of a naked foot, but was apparently a shoe sole which had been turned into stone. The forepart was missing, but there was the outline of at least 2/3 of it, and around this outline ran a well-defined sewn thread, which had, it appeared, attached the welt to the sole. Further on was another line of sewing, and in the center, where the foot would have rested had the object really been a shoe sole, there was an indentation exactly such as would have been made by the bone of the heel, rubbing upon and wearing down the material of which the sole had been made. Thus was found a fossil which is the foremost mystery of science today, for the rock in which it was found is at least 5 million years old." So
I remember reading about this somewhere.
I thought for a while that I thought for a while that they were trying to say this was a footprint of somebody wearing a shoe, but no, they're saying this is a fossilized sole of a shoe.
You could see this. You could see the thread
stitches.
pattern.
Yeah,
the
stitches. Yeah, and the indentation where the heel would have been. Yeah, so it was like an old shoe. Reed brought the specimen to New York, where he tried to bring it to the attention of other scientists. Reed reported, "On arrival at New York, I showed this fossil to Dr. James F. Kemp, geologist of Columbia University, Professors H. F. Osborne, W. D. Matthew, and E. O. Hovey of the American Museum of Natural History. All of these men reached the same conclusion, in effect, that it was the most remarkable natural imitation of an artificial object that they had ever seen."
That's right, yeah. I remember that.
The experts agreed, however, that the rock formation was Triassic, and manufacturers of shoes agreed that originally the specimen was a hand-welted sole. Dr. W. D. Matthew wrote a brief report on the find, declaring that while all the semblances of a shoe were present, including the threads with which it had been sewn, it was only a remarkable imitation, a freak of nature. Curiously enough, an inquiry by us to the American Museum of Natural History resulted in a reply that the report by Matthew is not in their files. Reed, despite Matthew's dismissal, nevertheless persisted. "I next got hold of a microphotographer and an analytical chemist of the Rockefeller Institute, who, on the outside, so as not to make it an institute matter, made photos and analyses of the specimen. The analysis proved up or removed any doubt of the shoe sole having been subjected to Triassic fossilization. The microphoto magnifications are 20 times larger than the specimen itself, showing the minutest detail of thread, twist, and warp.
That's right.
Proving conclusively that the shoe sole is not a resemblance, but is strictly the handiwork of man. Even to the naked eye, the threads can be seen distinctly, and the definitely symmetrical outlines of the shoe sole. Inside this rim and running parallel to it is a line which appears to be regularly perforated, as if for stitches. I may add that at least 2 geologists whose names will develop someday have admitted that the shoe sole is valid, a genuine fossilization in Triassic rocks."
Yeah.
The Triassic rock bearing the fossil shoe sole is now recognized as being far more than 5 million years old. The Triassic period is now generally dated at 213 to 248 million years ago.
They look at it with the magnifying glass and see the twisting of the thread. That is just like,
and they're like, wow, this is an amazing freak of nature natural artifact.
So cool.
And the guy who found it was also a geologist, John T. Reed, a mining engineer and geologist. So he was no, layman either. All right, this is one of my favorite ones right here. Block wall in an Oklahoma mine. All you Oklahomans out there, go find this. I'm making this demand right now. W.W. McCormick of Abilene, Texas, reported his grandfather's account of a stone block wall that was found deep within a coal mine. In the year 1928, I, Atlas Allman Mathis, was working in coal mine number 5, located 2 miles north of Heavener, Oklahoma. This was a shaft mine, and they told us it was 2 miles deep. The mine was so deep that they let us down into it on an elevator, and they pumped air down. It was so deep. This report was reprinted in a book by Brad Steiger. One evening, Mathis was blasting coal loose by explosives in room 24 of this mine. The next morning, said Mathis, there were several concrete blocks laying in the room. These blocks were 12-inch cubes and were so smooth and polished on the outside that all 6 sides could serve as mirrors. Yet they were full of gravel because I chipped one of them open with my pick and it was plain concrete inside. Mathis added, as I started to timber the room up, it caved in and I barely escaped. When I came back after the cave-in, a solid wall of these polished blocks was left exposed. About 100 to 150 yards further down our air core, another miner struck this same wall or one very similar. The coal in the mine was probably carboniferous, which would mean the wall was at least 286 million years old. According to Mathis, the mining company officers immediately pulled the men out of the mine and forbade them to speak about what they had seen, and the mine was closed in the fall of 1928, and the crew went to mine number 24, near Wilburton in Oklahoma. Mathis said the Wilburton miners told of finding a solid block of silver in the shape of a barrel with the prints of staves on it. The coal from Wilburton was formed between 280 and 320 million years ago.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
A barrel as in like the barrel of a gun or
No, with the prints of the staves on it. So I imagine
staves like a barrel.
Yeah.
Okay, like a wine, like a vessel.
A solid block of silver in the shape of a barrel. Like you have a barrel and you pour it full of molten silver and then the wood is gone and then you got the imprint.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Admittedly, says Cremo and Thompson, these are very bizarre stories, accompanied by very little in the way of proof. But such stories are told, and we wonder how many of them there are, and if any of them are true. In a book by M.K. Jessup, we recently ran across the following wall in coal mine story. It is reported that James Parsons and his 2 sons exhumed a slate wall in a coal mine at Hammondville in Ohio in 1868. It was a large, smooth wall, disclosed when a great mass of coal fell away from it, and on its surface, carved in bold relief, were several lines of hieroglyphics. Of course, such stories could be tall tales, but they might also be leads for interesting research. The foregoing sampling of discoveries indicating a relatively high level of civilization in very distant ages was compiled from reports published in the 19th and early 20th centuries, but similar reports continue up to the present day, and we shall now review some of them. So, metallic tubes from chalk in France, which means I will probably not be able to pronounce any of the names. Y. Druitt and H. Salfati announced in 1968 the discovery of semi-ovoid metallic tubes of identical shape but varying size in Cretaceous chalk. Our source is Ancient Man, a handbook of puzzling artifacts by William R. Corliss. I looked this book up. I was like, man, I need to get this. And it's not available on Kindle, but I did find hardcover versions that people are selling used, so I might buy one of those.
The Watchers just put up here about the
Heavener
runestone is where the mine is, where they discovered the block wall. I don't know if that's
relevant.
I don't know.
The chalk bed exposed in a quarry at Saint-Jean-de-Levay in France is estimated to be at least 65 million years old. Having considered and eliminated several hypotheses, Druitt and Salfati concluded that intelligent beings had lived 65 million years ago. Desiring more information, we wrote to the Geomorphology Laboratory at the University of Caen, to which Druitt and Salfati reportedly turned over their specimens, but we have not received a reply. So I found that interesting. He says, we invite readers to communicate to us any information they might have about this case or similar cases. But yeah, so basically there's a report of this, and these objects were reported on by a couple of scientists who were working for the university, for a university in a geomorphology laboratory. They turned over the specimens, but when these guys were writing the book, they tried to contact that university and did not receive a reply about it. And the artifacts, again, were metallic tubes in chalk. All right, shoe print in shale from Utah. In 1968, William J. Meister, a draftsman and amateur trilobite collector, reported finding a shoe print in the Wheeler Shale near Antelope Spring in Utah. This shoe-like indentation and its cast were revealed when Meister split open a block of shale. Clearly visible within the imprint were the remains of trilobites, extinct marine arthropods. The shale holding the print and the fossil is from the Cambrian and would thus be 505 to 590 million years old. Meister described the ancient shoe-like impression in an article that appeared in the Creation Research Society Quarterly. So this went into a creationist magazine. The heel print was indented in the rock about 1/8 of an inch more than the sole. The footprint was clearly that of the right foot because the sandal was well worn on the right side of the heel in characteristic fashion. Meister supplied the following important piece of additional information. On July 4th, I accompanied Dr. Clarence Coombs, Columbia Union College, Tacoma, Maryland, and Maurice Carlisle, a graduate geologist from the University of Colorado at Boulder, to the site of the discovery. After a couple of hours of digging, Mr. Carlisle found a mud slab, which he said convinced him that the discovery of fossil tracks in the location was a distinct possibility, since this discovery showed that the formation had at one time been at the surface. Scientists who were made aware of the Meister discovery were sometimes contemptuous in their dismissals. This is evident from private correspondence supplied to us by George F. Howe of Los Angeles Baptist College, who requested that we quote from it anonymously. A geologist from Brigham Young University, quite familiar with the Antelope Springs region, wrote in 1981 that the track represented an oddity of weathering which uninformed people mistakenly interpret for fossil forms. A professor of evolutionary biology from a Michigan university stated, when asked about the Meister print, I am not familiar with the trilobite case, but I would be greatly surprised if this isn't another case of fabrication or willful misinterpretation. There is not one case where a juxtaposition of this type has ever been confirmed. So far, the fossil record is one of the best tests that evolution has occurred. I put the creationists and those that believe in a flat earth in the same category. They simply do not want to believe in facts and hard evidence. There is not much you can do with such people. Nothing has emerged in recent years to refute the fact that evolution has and continues to occur, irrespective of what the self-proclaimed scientific creationists claim. The ability of individuals in our society to be duped and brainwashed, either intentionally or unknowingly, by our mass media and certain leaders never ceases to amaze me. The evolutionary biologist admitted that he had not familiarized himself with the facts and hard evidence relating to the Meister sandal prints before passing judgment, and he was thus guilty of the same sin he has accused the creationists of committing. We do not necessarily accept this print as genuine, but we believe it should be evaluated on its own merits rather than on the basis of inflexible preconceptions. Yeah. I don't know if it's a print either. They got a little picture of it here in the book. It's interesting looking, but is it a print? I don't know. And if it really is a print, is it really 505 million years old? I also don't know that either. Right. William Lee Stokes, a biologist and geologist at the University of Utah, examined the Meister print shortly after it was discovered. Stokes stated, after seeing the specimen, I explained to Mr. Meister why I could not accept it as a footprint and why geologists in general would not accept it. At the very least, we would expect a true footprint to be one of a sequence, showing right and left prints somewhat evenly spaced. of the same size and progressing regularly in one direction. It is most significant that no other matching prints were obtained. I know of no instance where a solitary, one-of-a-kind impression has been accepted and reported in a scientific journal as a genuine footprint, no matter how well preserved it might be.
Yeah. That's a good, I mean,
that's a great, yes, that's an excellent point. I agree. You need to find...
You want to see that progression.
Yeah, you need to find at least one more.
Yeah.
Right? Even if there's only two, a second one in a line with the first one, seeming to be the other foot.
Yeah. Maybe they only had 1 foot back then.
Monopods. But in an article that appeared in Scientific American in 1969, H. de Lumley reported a single human-like footprint from the Middle Pleistocene habitation site at Terra Amata in southern France. Stokes, so they're basically pointing out there that there have been single footprints that are accepted if they're in the right place, in the right strata, so on and so forth. Yeah. Stokes further stated, a true footprint should also show displacement or squeezing aside of the soft material into which the foot was pressed. From my examination of this specimen, I can say that there is no evidence of squeezing or pushing aside of the material. In 1984, one of us, Thompson, visited Meister in Utah. Close inspection of the print revealed no obvious reason why it could not be accepted as genuine. Concerning squeezing aside of the matrix, much depends on the consistency of the matrix and the nature of the object making the imprint. The rounded contours of a bare foot result in more pushing aside of the matrix than the sharp edges of the soles of footwear. We have observed that shoes and sandals can leave very sharp impressions in relatively compact, moist beach sand, with very little sign of pushing aside of the matrix. Shale, the rock in which the Meister print was made, is formed by the consolidation of clay, mud, and silt. One could microscopically examine the grain structure of the shale within the region of the print in order to determine whether or not there is any evidence suggesting that the print was not caused by pressure from above. Stokes concluded that the Meister specimen was a result of spalling, a natural fracturing of the rock, and stated that the geology department of the University of Utah had in its collection several products of spalling, some resembling footprints. One would have to see these specimens to judge if they really resemble footprints to the extent that the Meister specimen does. The shape of the Meister print, as shown by our visual inspection and computer analysis, almost exactly matches that of a modern shoe print. And yeah, you know, this whole thing about where they can check the material under the print to see if it's been compressed more than the material surrounding the print. I would love for somebody to do that with the cart ruts. You know, this is like a kind of a huge tangent.
Yeah, yes. Agreed.
So, furthermore, spalling normally occurs on the surface of rocks. The Meister print, however, was found in the interior of a block of shale that was split open. Significantly, the shale in the region of the print is of a rougher texture than the shale on the other parts of the split block's surface. This suggests that the rock split where it did not accidentally, but because of a line of weakness along the boundary of these two textures. One could therefore propose that an ancient shoe caused this shoe-shaped area of weakness. Alternatively, the area of weakness might have resulted from some other unknown cause, in which case the shoe-like shape is entirely coincidental. This would be a rather remarkable freak of nature, for the print does not even slightly depart from the shape of a genuine shoe. The Meister print, as evidence for a human presence in the distant past, is ambiguous. Some scientists have dismissed the print after only cursory examination. Others have rejected it sight unseen simply because its Cambrian age puts it outside the realm of what might be expected according to evolutionary theory. We suggest, however, that the resources of empirical investigation have not yet been exhausted and that the Meister print is worthy of further research.
Yeah, so people like Michael Shermer, you know, his point is like, well, if we dedicated a lot of time of all these like specialists to examine every
hoax fad,
from every, person that came up with something, then we would never get anywhere.
Right.
So like that's part of their argument is like, yeah, we don't we don't have time to.
Yeah. We don't have time to deal with your bullshit.
Yeah. You have one print. Like, you know.
Yeah.
If there were a bunch, maybe it would.
Yeah. But if it is really that old, it's amazing there's even one.
Right.
So I don't know. Like, if it is what they're suggesting it is, it's still interesting. Right? If it's like a natural artifact, it would be interesting to know why and how it came to be that way. Or maybe it was made by some kind of marine animal that just has a weird, like its footprint looks like a shoe, right? Like a slug or something. I don't know.
Yep.
All right, grooved sphere from South Africa. Now these are also famous out of place artifacts. These spheres. Over the past several decades, South African miners have found hundreds of metallic spheres, at least one of which has 3 parallel grooves running around its equator.
Yeah.
According to an article by Jace Jimison, the spheres are of 2 types. One of solid bluish metal with white flecks, and another which is a hollow ball filled with a white spongy center. I mean, they don't sound like geological artifacts. Rolf Marx, curator of the Museum of Klerksdorp, South Africa, where some of the spheres are housed, said, "The spheres are a complete mystery. They look man-made, yet at the time in Earth's history when they came to rest in this rock, no intelligent life existed. They're nothing like anything I have ever seen before." And yeah, this goes on, but we should take a break, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I've seen pictures of these.
Yeah, the Klerksdorp spheres. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be right back.
Yep. 33% brain expansion guaranteed. Here on Brothers of the Serpent podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Reading about legendary out-of-place artifacts and other strange objects found deep beneath the earth from The Hidden History of the Human Race by Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson. And yeah, where we left off, we were in the middle of the Klerksdorp spheres section of the book. So they say they wrote to Rolf Marx, who is the curator of the museum, for further information about the spheres, and he replied in a letter dated September 12th, 1984. "There is nothing scientific published about these globes, but the facts are. They are found in pyrophyllite, which is mined near the town of Ottosdal in the western Transvaal. This pyrophyllite is a quite soft secondary mineral with a count of only 3 on the Mohs scale, and was formed by sedimentation about 2.8 billion years ago."
Jeez. What, the mineral itself, or he's trying to say the spheres?
Well, the spheres are embedded in a layer that's considered to be 2.8 billion years old.
Good God.
On the other hand, the globes, which have a fibrous structure on the inside with a shell around it, are very hard and cannot be scratched even by steel. The Mohs scale of hardness is named after Frederick Mohs, who chose 10 minerals as reference points for comparative hardness, with talc the softest at 1 and diamond the hardest at 10. In his letter to us, Marx said that A. Bischoff, a professor of geology at the University of, something, told him that the spheres were limonite concretions. Limonite is a kind of iron ore. A concretion is a compact, rounded rock mass formed by localized cementation around a nucleus. One problem with this hypothesis is that the objects are limonite concretions concerns their hardness. As noted above, these metallic spheres cannot be scratched with a steel point, indicating that they are extremely hard. But standard references on minerals state that limonite registers only 4 to 5.5 on the Mohs scale, indicating a relatively low degree of hardness. Furthermore, Limonite concretions usually occur in groups like masses of soap bubbles stuck together. They do not, it seems, normally appear isolated and perfectly round, as is the case with the objects in question. Neither do they normally appear with parallel grooves encircling them. There's a picture of one of them.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
For the purpose of this study, it is the sphere with the 3 parallel grooves around its equator that most concerns us. Even if it is conceded that the sphere itself is a limonite concretion, one still must account for these grooves. In the absence of a satisfactory natural explanation, the evidence is somewhat mysterious, leaving open the possibility that the South African grooved sphere, found in mineral deposits that are 2.8 billion years old, was made by an intelligent being.
Yeah. This reminds me of the spheres that were found under the pyramid in South America.
Oh, yeah.
Or in, I guess, Mexico.
Yeah. That's
There's like a whole bunch of those like hematite coated chalk or clay spheres.
Yeah. It was really strange.
Yeah.
All right. Anomalous human skeletal remains. In the 19th and early 20th century, scientists found numerous stone implements and other artifacts in extremely old formations. They also discovered anatomically modern human skeletal remains in similarly ancient geological contexts. Although these human bones originally attracted considerable attention, they are now practically unknown. Most current literature gives one the impression that after the discovery of the first Neanderthal in the 1850s, no significant skeletal finds were made until the discovery of Java Man in the 1890s. Okay, so the first case is the Trenton femur. On December 1st, 1899, Ernest Volk, a collector working for the Peabody Museum of American Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University, discovered a human femur in a fresh railroad cut south of Hancock Avenue within the city limits of Trenton in New Jersey. The femur was found lying on a small ledge, 91 inches beneath the surface. Volk stated, about 4 inches over or above the bone was a place about the length of the bone where it evidently had fallen out of. The human femur was photographed by Volk, who declared that the overlying strata immediately above and for some distance on either side of the find were undisturbed. Volk said that the femur was thoroughly fossilized. 2 human skull fragments were taken from the same layer that yielded this femur. In a letter dated July 30th, 1897, Ron Witt of the New Jersey Geological Survey told us that the stratum containing the Trenton femur and skull fragments is from the Sangamon Interglacial and is about 107,000 years old. According to standard ideas, human beings of modern type arose in southern Africa about 100,000 years ago and migrated to America at most 30,000 years ago. So that has changed somewhat. On December 7th, 1899, Volk returned to the railway cut at about 24 feet west of the spot where he found the fossilized femur. In the same layer, Volk recovered 2 fragments of a human skull, and the strata immediately overhead and for some distance on either side were said to be undisturbed. Could the human bones have worked their way down from upper layers? Volk pointed out that the upper layers were red and yellow, but the human bones were white and chalky, consistent with the white sand layer in which they were found. Because the Trenton femur was like that of modern humans, Alice Hrdlicka of the Smithsonian Institution thought it must be of recent age. He expected that a genuinely ancient human femur should display primitive features. Hrdlicka therefore said about the Trenton femur, the antiquity of this specimen must rest on the geological evidence alone, but he was unable to point out anything wrong with the geological evidence. All right. Yeah, and that was, I mean, 107,000 years old is not, that's a little bit still outside the standard model now, but it's coming closer and closer to be more accepted. But, you know, you just have to wonder, will these ever get picked back up when the story, when the standard model story moves to accept that date? Will they go back and say, wow, let's go back and look at this bone that was found?
Probably not.
Right. All right, Galley Hills.
In some dusty box in the basement of some
right,
museum.
Or it's crumbled into dust. I mean, you know, like so often happens with these. But I guess he did say it was thoroughly fossilized.
Yeah.
So, Galley Hill skeleton. In 1888, workmen removing deposits at Galley Hill near London, England, exposed a bed of chalk. The overlying layers of sand, loam, and gravel were about 10 or 11 feet thick. One workman, Jack Alsop, informed Robert Elliott, a collector of prehistoric items, that he had discovered a human skeleton firmly embedded in these deposits about 8 feet below the surface and about 2 feet above the chalk bed. Alsop had removed the skull but left the rest of the skeleton in place. Elliott stated that he saw the skeleton firmly embedded in the stratum. We carefully looked for any signs of the section being disturbed, but failed, the stratification being unbroken. Then Elliott removed the skeleton and later gave it to E.T. Newton, who published a report granting it a great age. A schoolmaster named M.H. Hayes observed the bones in the apparently undisturbed deposits before Elliott removed the skeleton. Hayes also saw the skull just after it was exposed by a workman excavating the deposits. Hayes said about the bones, "No doubt could possibly arise to the observation of an ordinary intelligent person of their deposition contemporaneously with that of the gravel. This undisturbed state of the stratum was so palpable to the workman that he said the man or animal was not buried by anybody." Numerous stone tools were also recovered from the Galley Hill site. According to modern opinion, the Galley Hill site would date to the Holstein interglacial, which occurred about 330,000 years ago. Anatomically, the Galley Hill skeleton was judged to be of the modern human type. Most scientists now think that anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, originated in Africa about 100,000 years ago. They say that Homo sapiens sapiens eventually entered Europe in the form of Cro-Magnon man approximately 30,000 years ago, replacing the Neanderthals. So just what do modern paleoanthropologists say about the Galley Hill skeleton? Despite the stratigraphic evidence reported by Hayes and Elliott, K.P. Oakley and M.F.A. Montague concluded in 1949 that the skeleton must have been recently buried in the Middle Pleistocene deposits. They consider the bones, which were not fossilized, to be only a few thousand years old. This is also the opinion of almost all anthropologists today.
So in this case, where they can't dispute the legitimacy of the skeleton
or the find, yeah,
they're just like, it
was a burial. Yeah. The Galley Hill bones had a nitrogen content similar to that of fairly recent bones from other sites in England. Nitrogen is one of the constituent elements of protein, which normally decays with the passage of time. But there are many recorded cases of proteins being preserved in fossils for millions of years. Because the degree of nitrogen preservation may vary from site to site, one cannot say for certain that the relatively high nitrogen content of the Galley Hill bones means they are recent. The Galley Hill bones were found in loam, a clayey sediment known to preserve proteins. Oakley and Montague found the Galley Hill human bones had a fluorine content similar to that of late Pleistocene and Holocene bones from other sites, in other words, recent bones. It is known that bones absorb fluorine from groundwater, but the fluorine content of groundwater may vary widely from place to place, and this makes comparison of fluorine contents of bones from different sites an unreliable indicator of their relative ages. Later, the British Museum Research Laboratory obtained a carbon-14 date of 3,310 years for the Galley Hill skeleton, but this test was performed using methods now considered unreliable. Also, it is highly probable that the Galley Hill bones kept in a museum for 80 years were contaminated with recent carbon, causing the test to give a falsely young date. Yeah, we kind of discussed this a little bit with the wood from the hook handle rod.
That's right.
It sat in a museum or a dusty basement for 100 years or something. You know, and then they test it and they get a date that's still 500 years too old, but who knows how much the sample was contaminated. And also, I bet you they were using the old carbon-14 dating in this particular case for the Galley Hill skeleton, where you basically like sit the sample there and wait for particles to decay and count those. In which case, you have to use an enormous piece and contamination is way easier because you've got a big piece, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now you can take a tiny sample and put it in the...
and you can even like core out a sample.
Yeah, you core out a sample. Yeah.
So
Who knows?
I'm just thinking about like, you know, what would be the incentive? Like, what possible motives could somebody have to like fake this? Because I mean, this is where a lot of people's minds go, right? When you know, it's a
fake.
big battle with the you know, creationists versus the evolutionists, and it's like,
Yeah.
you know, in some cases you can see, okay, there's a clear motive why somebody would put this skeleton in this context, because it leads towards one of the theories that there's like, you know, that there's a debate about, but this doesn't.
Right.
Like who has an incentive to put an anatomically modern human skeleton in some sediment that's like ridiculously old?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the creationists would be doing it according to, I mean, I don't know if they've done this, but they would be doing it in order to say that all of your dating for all the strata is wrong and the Earth is really young. Like the young Earth creationists are doing that, you know.
Okay.
Like they love these. I mean,
so they use.
When I used to go looking for out of place artifacts on the interwebs, a lot of times the sites that come up are definitely young Earth creationists because they're trying to say that all these artifacts mean that their story is the right one. When
because
I'm just
it
like,
just makes the Earth like really young. So
that's what they think. I'm just like, it doesn't mean that, right? They already have their conclusion as well. So what they're trying to do is find artifacts that stand outside of the standard model and say that means our conclusion is right, and that's not the right way to do it.
No, but
yes,
you answered the question, because I agree with you that's not what that means. But
right.
I mean,
yeah.
But so then you can imagine that somebody would try to plant something somewhere in a strata that's supposed to be ridiculously old because they don't believe that the Earth is that old to begin with.
Right. And they're thinking that this will show them that that's actually wrong.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
Even though it's fake, right? Like it's like, really, you know, like to me, I mean, I guess people would do that, but
it's idiotic.
I'm just like, you're not actually in your own mind. What are you getting out of this?
Yeah, I know.
Because you didn't prove them wrong because it's a hoax and you know it, right? I don't understand what the gain would be to them.
But apparently it's happened on both sides.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well,
so with crazy. The gain that they want is like notoriety, right? They want fame. Like, oh, I found a model breaking artifact.
Yeah.
You know, or on the other side, the scientific one, they're like, I found a model confirming artifact. Like that's what they want. And that gives them fame. Right.
So it's all selfish. It's just about themselves. It's not really about.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
It's not really. It's not really about the story.
It's definitely not. If you're hoaxing something, it's completely not about the story, right? Because you're making it up, right? All the way. Even if you think your story is right and you're trying to hoax something that points people towards your story, you've still made a fake artifact.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, I don't know. It has to be. It doesn't have to be, but it seems like it's just a selfish act.
Yeah.
But who knows what their motives are? I don't know, but that's just one that I think of. But yeah. Okay. In attempting to discredit the testimony of Elliott and Hayes, who said no signs of burial were evident at Galley Hill, Oakley and Montague offered several arguments in addition to their chemical and radiometric tests. For example, Oakley and Montague argued that the relatively complete nature of the Galley Hill skeleton was a sure sign that it was deliberately buried. In fact, almost all of the ribs, the backbone, the forearms, hands, and feet were missing. So it is not actually relatively complete, right? In the case of Lucy, the most famous specimen of Australopithecus afarensis, more of the skeleton was preserved. And no one has yet suggested that the Australopithecines buried their dead. Scientists have also discovered fairly complete skeletal remains of Homo erectus and Homo habilis individuals. These cases, as all paleoanthropologists would agree, definitely do not involve deliberate burial. It is thus possible for relatively complete hominid skeletons to be preserved apart from burial.
Yeah.
But even if the Galley Hill skeleton was a burial, the burial may not have been recent. Sir Arthur Keith suggested in 1928. Weighing all the evidence, we are forced to the conclusion that the Galley Hill skeleton represents a man buried when the lower gravel formed a land surface. As can be seen, old bones point beyond themselves quite obliquely to events in the remote and inaccessible past. Controversy about their age is almost certain to arise, and in many cases the available evidence is insufficient to allow disputes to be definitely settled. This would appear to be true of the Galley Hill. The report of Oakley and Montague casts doubt on the testimony of Elliot and Hayes, but at the same time, the testimony of Elliot and Hayes casts doubt on the report of Oakley and Montague. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, these people are arguing, and it was found so long ago when there were so much fewer tools available for the, and I mean, even in modern times, if some skeleton was found, by a backhoe operator, and he pulled it out of the ground before they really realized what they were doing, then it would be too late. Especially, and if it stood outside the standard model, they would just say, "Well,
yeah,
all the evidence that would actually allow this thing to destroy the model is gone, so therefore the model stands."
Yeah.
All right. The Moulin Kegon jaw. In 1863. J. Boucher de Perth discovered an anatomically modern human jaw in the Moulin Kegon pit in France, which is why I can't pronounce these names. He removed it from a layer of black sand and gravel that also contained stone implements of the Acheulean type. The black layer was 16 and a half feet below the surface of the pit. The Acheulean sites at Abbeville are of the same age as the Holstein Interglacial and would thus be about 330,000 years old. Upon hearing of the discovery of the Abbeville jaw and tools, a group of distinguished British geologists visited Abbeville and were at first favorably impressed. Later, however, it was alleged that some of the stone implements in the collection were forgeries foisted upon him by workmen. The British scientists then began to doubt the authenticity of the jaw. Taking a tooth found with the jaw back to England, they cut it open and were surprised at how well preserved it appeared. This enhanced their doubt, but many physical anthropologists have noted that fossil teeth of great age are often well preserved. Yeah, so I found that strange. They take the tooth back and they cut it open, and it's a real tooth, but it's very well preserved, and they're like, wow, this must not be very old. I mean, we have dinosaur teeth, right?
Yeah. Are they rocks?
Yeah. Usually they're rocks. Yeah, I think they're fully fossilized most of the time.
Yeah.
Also, the Moulin Kegon jaw had a coloring, quote, which was found to be superficial, unquote, and was easily scrubbed from one of the portions of the bone.
How dare you scrub off the red ochre?
Some took this to be an indication of forgery, but British anthropologist Sir Arthur Keith later said that this feature of the jaw does not invalidate its authenticity. In May of 1863, British geologists met with their French counterparts in Paris to decide the status of the jaw. The commission, we are here to decide the status of this jaw.
That must make for an interesting conversation.
I know, yeah.
On the plane or whatever.
That's right.
However you're traveling.
Yeah. I'm going to France to decide the status of an ancient jaw. The commission jointly declared in favor of the authenticity of the jaw, despite some reservations by two of the British members. Thereafter, however, the British members continued to oppose the jaw and eventually won most scientists over to their side. So when they met and they had the jaw and they were all looking at it, they decided this thing is legit. But two of them continued to say it wasn't and eventually managed to win over everybody else who hadn't been there looking at the jaw. French anthropologists, said Keith, continued to believe in the authenticity of the jaw until between 1880 and 1890 when they ceased to include it in the list of discoveries of ancient man. At the present time, opinion is almost unanimous in regarding the jaw as a worthless relic. We see that its relegation to oblivion begins when the belief became fixed that Neanderthal man represented a Pleistocene phase in the evolution of modern races, and that opinion, we have seen, is no longer tenable. In other words, scientists who believe the Neanderthals were the immediate ancestors of Homo sapiens could not accommodate the Moulin-Kegon jaw because it would have meant that anatomically modern human beings were in existence before the Neanderthals. Today, the idea that the Neanderthals were the direct ancestors of the modern human type is out of vogue, but this in itself does not clear the way for the acceptance of the Abbeville jaw, which, if genuine, would be over 300,000 years old. So the reasons for them, basically, I think they're saying the reasons for them discarding the jaw as a worthwhile artifact was because it was too modern and Neanderthals were the direct ancestors. Now that's no longer the case, but it's still too old.
But this was in the 1890s that they were doing this. They had this meeting? Or that was when they stopped including it?
In 1890, the French anthropologists ceased to include it in the list of discoveries of ancient man because they had been making finds, right? And they're saying this happened when the belief that the Neanderthal man represented a Pleistocene phase in the evolution of modern races.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case.
But it's too late now because they already threw it out.
And I think it's still too old. From the information we now have at our disposal, it is difficult to form a definite opinion about the authenticity of the Moulin-Kegon jaw, even if we accept that the jaw and the many flint implements found along with it were fakes. What does this tell us about the nature of paleoanthropological evidence? As we shall see, the Moulin-Kegon jaw and tools, if they were forgeries, are not alone. Piltdown Man was accepted for 40 years before being dismissed as an elaborate hoax. Okay, now they have an update. So I guess this is an update specifically for this version of the book that didn't make it into the Forbidden Archaeology version. We have recently uncovered new information that gives us a better impression of the Moulin-Kegon jaw. In the aftermath of the debate, De Perth continued to maintain that his discoveries were genuine. To help prove this, he conducted several more excavations at Moulin-Kegon under very strict controls and in the presence of trained scientific observers. These excavations yielded many more anatomically modern human bones, fragments, and teeth. These discoveries, which received almost no attention in the English-speaking world, are significant demonstrations of a human presence in the Middle Pleistocene of Europe over 300,000 years ago.
Wow.
They also tend to strengthen the case for the authenticity of the original jaw.
Yeah, so it's like, man, let's go dig there today.
Right. That's what I'm saying. In some of these cases, I'm just like, man, if they were finding that many and then they would just be like, well, let's go to a random spot in this same strata and dig, and then they find a whole bunch more stuff. I'm like, dude, you know, keep digging.
Yeah, it'd be cool if...
That's why I was saying the Red Crag, because apparently that's like a cliff that's where the formation itself is exposed, and it's constantly being eroded away by, you know, because it's a cliff face and there's like water. So if you could go there, you could be picking up fossils and who knows, implements maybe falling out of it because they were finding tons of them in there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, there's, you know, I'm sure there's like an up and coming group of archaeologists like, you know, Mark Young, for example.
Yeah.
That might look into some of this stuff and be like, you know, let's go dig there just for the hell of it. I mean, this is how...
That's not a knife.
What's that?
That's not a knife.
Yeah, that's right. This is how Göbekli Tepe was uncovered.
Yeah. They went back and looked at it again. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the guy was he was like looking for his own gig, right?
Yeah. And he had helped in excavations of a similar type of site, not nearly as ancient.
Yeah, but he was kind of like, well, what am I going to do? You know, I need to do something that's like my own thing.
Yeah.
He'd, you know, he was trying to get his own gig going, and he's like, well, I'll just go dig here.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. And he did.
Yeah.
All right. More France, which means more names I can't say. Clichy skeleton. In 1868, Eugene Bertrand reported to the Anthropological Society of Paris that he had found parts of a human skull along with a femur, tibia, and some foot bones in a quarry on the Avenue de Clichy. The bones were found 5.25 meters or 17.3 feet beneath the surface. Sir Arthur Keith believed the layer in which the bones were found was the same age as the one in which the Galley Hill skeleton was discovered. This would make these bones approximately 330,000 years old. The depth at which these human fossils were found, over 17 feet, argues against recent burial. But Gabriel de Mortier said that a workman at the quarry on the Avenue de Clichy told him that he had stashed a skeleton in the pit. Even after hearing de Mortier relate the workman's story about stashing the bones of the Clichy skeleton, a number of scientists remained convinced that Bertrand's discovery was genuine. For example, Professor E.T. Hammy said, Mr. Bertrand's discovery seems to me to be so much less debatable in that it is not the first of this kind at Avenue de Clichy. Indeed, our esteemed colleague, Mr. Ribot, found at that same locality and almost the same depth human bones that he has given to me to study.
So the guy who is predisposed to not believe that the bones are legitimate, like a workman just told him that he stashed them there.
He went and found himself a workman that would claim that he stashed the bones. Yeah.
No. This workman actually had himself a skeleton.
Yeah. Sure, I had a skeleton.
Yeah, I kept it in a box, under the kitty litter box. Nobody found it. It's a random
that's
skeleton.
A great question. I think the next question should have been, where did you get the skeleton, guy? Yeah.
Just keeping it, in the back room.
I mean, everybody's got a skeleton lying around somewhere, right? Come on.
It was in his closet.
That's right. Keith reported that initially almost all the authorities in France believed that the Clichy skeleton was as old as the layer in which Bertrand said it was found. Later, after accepting the Neanderthals as the Pleistocene ancestors of modern humans, French anthropologists dropped the skeleton, which predated the Neanderthals, from the list of bona fide discoveries. A representative of the modern human type should not have been existing before his supposed ancestors. The Neanderthals are thought to have existed from 30,000 to 150,000 years ago, but the Clichy skeleton would be over 300,000 years old. In his remarks to the Anthropological Society, Bertrand provided additional evidence for the great antiquity of the Clichy skeleton. He stated that he found a human ulna in the stratum containing the other bones of the Clichy human skeleton. The ulna is the larger of the two long bones of the forearm. When Bertrand tried to extract the ulna, it crumbled into dust. He offered this as proof that the Clichy skeleton must have been native to the layer in which it was found. Apparently, Bertrand reasoned that a bone as fragile as the decayed ulna could not have possibly been removed from an upper layer of the quarry and stashed by a workman in the lower layer in which Bertrand found it. It would certainly have been destroyed in the process. This indicated that the ulna belonged to the stratum in which Bertrand found it, as did the other human bones. So I guess the idea is that the workman found it up high and moved it down low.
And who's this guy Bertrand? Is he like
Bertrand is the one that...
Is he an archaeologist? Is he educated? Does he know what he's doing? Because, I mean...
Well, I can't remember, but he's shown up earlier in the book as finding artifacts and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I don't remember what his... but he was making reports to the Anthropological Society of Paris, so he did have some credentials.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the deposit, but it's pretty obvious when you're digging in already previously disturbed soil.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. That's why they mention colors. Above this layer, it's yellow and brown, and then the layer itself is white. If this had been a burial where they had to dig through those, there would be yellow and brown stuff and the white stuff around the skeleton, and there wasn't, right? And in some of these, they're like the layer the skeleton was in was sand. Above it was clay. There's no clay down in the sand where the skeleton is.
Yeah.
And the skeleton's face down. Most burials are not face down. Unless, I guess if it's an enemy guy that you killed, you might throw him in a shallow hole and kick some sand over him.
Hard to tell. Down. It's hard to tell if the sand you're digging in was already dug in.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant.
But this is the thing. if the grave was dug in the sand, like in other words, when the sand was the surface, then the grave is as old as the sand.
I just mean the guy that buried it in there. Like if a guy really found it up high and stashed it down there.
Yeah.
Sand would be one type of soil where you could actually do that, and it would be hard for someone to know whether it's been disturbed already or not.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see if I can find what this stuff was. Yeah, it doesn't really say what the material was. But it was 17 feet below the surface.
Yeah, so they're digging into a bank, right? Like they're digging into a wall. So, I mean, the guy would have had to have dug a little alcove into the sandy layer and put the thing in there and then push the sand back in and tried to make it look like it hadn't previously been dug in. And that's hard. That would be hard to do.
Right, yeah.
That would take some work. When did he get to do that? He did it at night?
Yeah. Found the skeleton secretly.
No one knew.
No one knew, and then he moved it secretly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that.
All right, La Denis skull fragments. In the 1840s, pieces of human bone were... Whoop, we got to take a break.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I just noticed. Sorry.
Time
Hear about
flies.
those skull fragments next segment.
Final segment of the final hour of the final episode of I mean, wait a minute. Not the final episode.
Yeah.
Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
That's right. After this, we're done.
It's
podcast over.
I can't do that. Favorite time of the week.
Yeah. You get to do the next book report.
Nope. Not happening, buddy. Podcast over.
All right, yeah. If that's how it's going to be.
I come here for entertainment.
Well, we need to do something else every week where you entertain me. I mean, I guess you do. Like, you got one-liners and dad jokes.
I played the trumpet for your Space Weather.
Yeah, that was pretty entertaining. I have to admit. All right. Skull fragments found in France. In the 1840s, pieces of human bone were discovered in the midst of volcanic strata at La Denis in France. Of particular interest was the frontal bone of a human skull. Sir Arthur Keith stated that the frontal differs in no essential particular from the frontal bone of a modern skull.
Elle is a bona fide human bone.
Yeah. So Keith seems to be showing up a bunch here in this section. I guess he's a British knight. So can you do that again in a British accent?
No. I just thought the bona fide discovery. I mean, you said it earlier.
It's bona fide.
It's bona fide.
Yeah.
Human bone.
Lots of respectable people get hit by trains. They're bona fide. Right?
Some meme?
No, it's Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, okay.
The frontal was taken from sediments deposited between two layers of lava. The first layer of lava was from the Pliocene and the last from the late Pleistocene. The skull bone thus could be either a few thousand years or as many as 2 million years old. The bone was found to have about the same nitrogen and fluorine content as bones from late Pleistocene sites elsewhere in France, but such comparisons are not of much value because the content of nitrogen or fluorine in bones depends heavily on sediment type, temperature, and water flow, which can vary greatly from place to place. The true age of the La Denis frontal remains unknown, but because there is reason to believe it could be as old as 2 million years, we have included it here. So that's interesting. It could be it's so little information that it could be a couple of thousand years old or 2 million years old based on the lava layers above and below it. All right, Ipswich skeleton. In 1911, J. Reed Moore discovered, remember this guy? He showed up a lot with the artifact discoveries. Red Crag, Moore. He discovered an anatomically modern human skeleton beneath a layer of glacial boulder clay near the town of Ipswich in East Anglia region of England. Reading through various secondary accounts, we learned that J. Reed Moore later changed his mind about this skeleton, declaring it recent. We thus did not consider the Ipswich skeleton for inclusion in this book, but after further investigation, we determined that the Ipswich skeleton could be genuinely old. The skeleton was found at a depth of 1.38 meters, which is about 4.5 feet, between a layer of boulder clay and some underlying glacial sands. These deposits could be as much as 400,000 years old. Moore was aware of the possibility that the skeleton might represent a recent burial. Therefore, he carefully verified the unbroken and undisturbed nature of the strata in and under which the skeleton lay. As for the condition of the bones, Sir Arthur Keith said it was similar to that of Pleistocene animal fossils found elsewhere in those same glacial sands. The discovery, however, inspired intense opposition. Keith wrote that if the skeleton had been as primitive as Neanderthal man, no one would have doubted it was as old as the boulder clay. But under the presumption that the modern type of man is also modern in origin, he stated, a degree of high antiquity is denied to such specimens. Despite opposition, Moore initially stuck to his guns, holding that the Ipswich skeleton was genuinely old. So what then happened to change his mind? He found nearby at the same level some stone tools resembling those from the Aurignacian period, considered to be about 30,000 years old. He concluded that the layer of boulder clay above the skeleton had been formed at that time from the sludge-like remnants of the original boulder clay deposit formed hundreds of thousands of years earlier. In Moore's statements, we find nothing that compels us to accept a recent age of 30,000 years for this skeleton. Sophisticated stone tools comparable to those of Aurignacian Europe turned up all over the world in very distant times. In the 1960s, such implements were discovered at Huatulco, Mexico, in strata yielding uranium series age of over 200,000 years. During the 19th century, very advanced stone objects turned up in the California gold mines in gravels that might be as old as the Eocene. Therefore, we cannot agree with Moyer that the discovery of tools of advanced type at the same level as the Ipswich skeleton was sufficient reason to reinterpret the site stratigraphy to bring the age of the skeleton into harmony with the supposed age of the tools. In other words, the advanced nature of the tools made him think that the layer itself was younger, and therefore the skeleton was younger, which is not right, because there's plenty of places, even if you're just looking at accepted finds, where you find very primitive types of tools along with very advanced kinds.
That's right.
Moyer gave no geological reasons whatsoever in support of his conclusion that the boulder clay was a recently redeposited sludge. Therefore, the simplest hypothesis is that it really was a layer of intact glacial boulder clay, as originally reported by Moyer and recorded by the British Geological Survey on its detailed map of the region. So even the Geological Survey says it's old clay, but Moyer redated it after finding the tools. The glacial sands in which the Ipswich skeleton was found must have been...
Which could be legit.
Yeah.
I mean...
It could be. Yeah.
We've definitely learned from...
There's no reason to pick one or the other yet, is what they're saying, I think. Yeah. But yeah, redeposition does take place, for sure.
But I just mean redating the age of the clays is not... That's a logical way to go, is my point. Because we've been talking about this the whole time, right? Like, well, maybe some of these require redating of the geological ages of these sediments.
Yeah, but not based on the shape of the tools, right?
Well, I mean, in some cases, yeah. If you're thinking that this coal bed is 300 million years old, and then you find a gold chain in it, that is reason to question the geological age of the coal bed.
Yeah, yeah.
right? It's
or
both.
Or to completely restructure the entire story of everything we know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just both, right? You can do both. Both are in question, is my point. So it's not...
Yeah. Or dinosaurs wore gold chains, man. Maybe they like the bling. Old T-Rex lost his bling in that coal. Okay, the glacial sands in which the Ipswich skeleton was found must have been laid down between the onset of the Anglian glaciation about 400,000 years ago and the onset of the Hoxnean interglacial about 330,000 years ago. It would thus appear that the Ipswich skeleton is between 330,000 and 400,000 years old. Some authorities put the onset of the Mindell glaciation equivalent to the Anglian at about 600,000 years old, which would give the Ipswich skeleton an age potentially that great. Yet human beings of modern type are not thought to have appeared in Western Europe before 30,000 years ago. Yeah, so even that, they're arguing about the possible dates of these interglacials and thus the deposition of this glacial boulder clay.
Yeah, now what time is this happening?
Oh, like when was the discovery? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Let's see, 1911.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that would be one of the great benefits of having modern scientists go back through these records, because we have so much more
instruments and tools.
Context for the dates, ice cores and all this kind of stuff to know more about these interglacial periods and when they took place, or at least there's
and you're also right that like the other thing that we have to keep in mind is if we include enormous global catastrophes in recent periods, then it is possible to take entire layers of glacial stuff and mix it up and throw humans into it that aren't as old as that glacial clay.
Absolutely, yeah.
And including tools from a different site that are a totally different age, right?
Yeah.
It could be redeposition of all of this stuff altogether, like picks up tools from somewhere, picks up bones from somewhere else. Both of the tools and the bones are not of the same age, but they all get mixed into the glacial clay, which is also a different age from everything else that's in it. Yeah.
Yeah, so technically you could take... So I don't see what the big problem is with evolution and humans being like ridiculously old, right? Like if anatomically modern humans were millions of years old, it's just a restructuring of like what you're... Because it's like the
we
human...
got an extra 500 million years to play with now,
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And the human timeline is like this specific aspect of evolution that's highly focused on.
Yeah.
But nobody minds that the cockroach is still here, and it also was here like millions and millions of years ago.
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
That's right. Yeah. Or like
no one's really concerned with all of its ancestors and who came first and where did they migrate from, and was the cockroach out of Antarctica? No one cares. That's not a there's no hypothesis about
the
that.
out of Antarctica hypothesis for cockroaches.
No one cares.
Oh man, we need to write that paper.
So my point is it's like there is the feud between the sort of creationist, evolutionist thing that was going on. And that was the impetus for a lot of like, let's settle this. Yeah. Let's get these, we got to find these things that are going to be our anchors to this story that is basically just like, get these guys out of here.
Yeah. I am tired of arguing with these creationists.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's, you don't have to have, I just don't see it as necessary for evolution, for the idea, for the hypothesis, for the theory.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like who cares if anatomically modern humans are 200 million years old? Yeah. It doesn't disprove the idea of evolution.
Right.
It just changes. I mean, you have to move the... You have to mess with your timeline or whatever.
Yeah, you have to move the advent of mammals way back.
I don't think it again, this is one of those things that this doesn't actually answer any questions. It's just illustrating that there's a possibility that the timeline is wrong.
Yeah, in some way. or in many ways.
Yeah. And again, geological timelines are probably wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't, based on that story in the beginning, I don't think that is a question. I mean, the standard model is questioning that. Oh, crap. It's 500 million years older than we thought.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's part of people are having to accept that it could be wrong.
Yeah.
So this doesn't seem like it should be that big of a problem. I just wish that some of these things would be opened up and they would go back and look.
Yeah. I love that idea. No one cares that the cockroach is the same as it's always been for 200 million years. Why is it a big deal that humans can't do that?
We were still squashing those bitches 250 million years ago, dude.
I think that's kind of what these guys are saying. And we were talking a little bit about the creationist thing, and I think Cremo and Thompson are coming from their background it's some kind of, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's some kind of Vedic thing, right? So they believe in they believe in the antiquity of humans in the sense that it's part of the universe. I can't really, don't take my word for this, but they have this idea that that humans are just as ancient as anything else in the universe, and that's part of the way the universe is designed, because that's their religion, I guess is what you could say. This is a huge, massive oversimplification. Maybe somebody who understands this better than I do can explain it. But, they say this a little bit in the beginning of the book. They're like, look, we're from this particular kind of institute, and it's a Vedic kind of study. But they're like, we're just going to look at the scientific data. But we are inclined to believe that humans are very, very, very old because they're part of the original idea of the universe itself. Okay. So they're not young Earth creationists, but they may have a religious perspective. But their religious perspective says, yeah, the universe is very ancient, but so are people, because they're part of the universe and they have been from the beginning. Okay. That's why they're putting out, they're like, yeah, so maybe humans could be 540 million years old if there's a gold chain in this coal that's supposed to be that old, right?
Yeah.
Because they're basically like, yeah, well, according to our beliefs, humans have been around. That's
not a problem.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah. However old the universe is, humans are just as old. So. But they also say in the beginning of the book, we admit that this may require, rather than dating some of these things back so old, that this may just require a restructuring of the dating of geological strata.
Yeah.
So I think that they're pretty even-handed and fair in this book. Yeah, and they do state at the beginning, yeah, we do come from this particular Vedic perspective.
Yeah.
So, all right. Terra Amata. The Terra Amata site is located on the Mediterranean coast of southern France. Damn it. There, in the late 1960s, French anthropologists Henry de Lumley found oval patterns of post holes and stone circles, indicating that hominids erected temporary shelters and built fires about 400,000 years ago. Also found were bone tools. Among them was one apparently used as an awl, perhaps to sew skins. Impressions found in the old land surface at the site were said to demonstrate that the hominids slept or sat on hides. Stone implements were also found, including an object described as a projectile point made from volcanic rock obtained from the Estoril region 30 miles away. Significantly, no hominid fossils were found at Terra Amata. In his 1969 article about the Terra Amata discoveries published in Scientific American, de Lumley did, however, report the imprint of a right foot, 9.5 inches long, preserved in the sand of a dune. De Lumley did not identify the type of hominid that made the print, but, judging from the available reports, the footprint is not different from that of an anatomically modern human being. This print tends to strengthen the skeletal evidence from the Middle Pleistocene sites we have just discussed. Okay, Buenos Aires skull. A very strong case for anatomically modern humans existing in very early times comes from Argentina. In 1869, workers excavating a dry dock in Buenos Aires found a human...
I think it's Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires. Found a human skull. They took it from the rudder pit at the bottom of the excavation after breaking through a layer of a hard limestone-like substance called tosca. The level at which the skull was found was 11 meters below the bed of the river La Plata, 36 feet. And there's a picture at the top of the skull.
Oh, man.
Yeah. The workers who found the skull gave it to Mr. Juner, or Huner, their supervisor, a senior member of the Public Works Division of the Port of Buenos... How do you say it?
Iris.
Information about the skull was furnished to the Argentine paleontologist Florentino Emegano by Mr. Edward Marsh Simpson.
Wait, Edward Marge Simpson?
Marsh.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
He was an engineer for the company contracted to excavate the port of Buenos Aires. In the opinion of Emegano, the skull removed from the rudder pit belonged to a Pliocene precursor of Homo sapiens. He called this precursor Diprothmo platensis. But according to Alice Hrdlicka of the Smithsonian Institution, the skull was just like that of modern humans. The skull was found in what Alice called the uppermost portion of the pre-Encenadan stratum. According to modern geological opinion, the pre-Encenadan stratum should be at least 1 to 1.5 million years old. Even at 1 million years, the presence of a fully modern human skull anywhere in the world, what to speak of South America, would be unexpected. Mr. J.E. Clark, the foreman of the workers who found the skull, said he was quite sure the skull was found at the rudder pit and under Tosca. Bailey Willis, the geologist who accompanied Hrdlicka on his expedition to Argentina, interviewed Mr. Juner and reported, "The fragment of skull was taken out of the well, i.e. the rudder pit, and although this statement rests on the say-so of the foreman who was told so by a workman, it appears to be the one item in the early history of the find that is not open to serious doubt." Willis went on to offer some vague, unfounded speculations on how the skull could have arrived in that position. For his part, Alice Hrdlicka thought the fact that the skull was modern in shape was enough to rule out any great age. His prejudice is evident in the following statement from his 1912 book. "The antiquity, therefore, of any human skeletal remains which do not present marked differences from those of modern man may be regarded, on morphologic grounds, as only insignificant geologically, not reaching in time, in all probability, beyond the modern, still unfinished geologic formations." So here we have a clear formulation of the dubious principle of dating by morphology. And basically, to reiterate what the guy was saying, he was like, since it's shaped like a modern human, it must be modern.
Yep.
All right, South American Homo erectus. Before moving on, let us consider another South American find with unsettling implications for current thinking about human evolution in general and the population of the New World in particular. In 1970, Canadian archaeologist Alan Lyle Bryan found in a Brazilian museum a fossil skull cap with very thick walls and exceptionally heavy brow ridges, reminiscent of Homo erectus. This skull cap came from a cave in the Lagoa Santa region of Brazil. When Bryan showed photographs of the skull cap to several American physical anthropologists, they were unable to believe it could have come from the Americas and proposed that it was either a fake, a cast, or possibly an old world skull cap that had somehow been introduced into the Brazilian collection examined by Bryan. But Bryan countered that both he and his wife, who also saw the skull cap, had abundant experience with human skulls and human fossil bones. And they were both quite sure that the skull cap could not have been fake or cast. It was a genuine, highly fossilized human skull cap. That the Lagoa Santa calote was not an old world fossil accidentally introduced into the Brazilian collection was supported, said Bryan, by the fact that it differed in several important measurements from known old world skulls. So what is the significance of the Lagoa Santa skull? The presence of hominids with Homo erectus features in Brazil at any time in the past is highly anomalous. Paleoanthropologists holding standard views say that only anatomically modern humans ever came to the Americas. The methodology of science allows for views to change, but the kind of change inherent in accepting the presence of Homo erectus in the New World would be revolutionary. The Lagoa Santa skull cap mysteriously disappeared from the Brazilian museum after it was examined by Brian. An important skeleton discovered by Hans Reck at Olduvai Gorge also disappeared from a museum. In the case of Brian and Reck's discoveries, we at least had a chance to hear about them before they disappeared. But we suspect that other fossils have escaped our attention because they were misplaced in museums or were perhaps intentionally discarded without report.
Ugh. That's worse than hoaxing.
Yeah.
The find.
Yeah, it is. Erasing a legitimate one.
Yeah.
Or even one that's still questionable.
Yep.
Right? In 1855, a human jaw was discovered at Foxhall in England by workers digging in a quarry. John Taylor, the town druggist, purchased the Foxhall jaw from a workman who wanted a glass of beer.
Sounds like a good trade.
Man, I really need some beer. All right, well, what do you got? Well, I have this jaw. Sure, I'll buy it. Here's the beer.
That's a fair deal. Take it.
That's a fair deal. Take it. And Taylor called it to the attention of Robert H. Collier, an American physician then residing in London. Collier, having acquired the fossil, visited the quarry on Mr. Law's farm. He noted that the bed from which the jaw was said to have been taken was 16 feet below the surface. The condition of the jaw, thoroughly infiltrated with iron oxide, was consistent with the incorporation in this bed. Collier said that the Foxhall jaw was the oldest relic of the human animal in existence. The 16-foot level at Foxhall is the same from which Moore later recovered stone tools and signs of fire. Anything found at this level would be at least 2.5 million years old. Aware that he was in the possession of a fossil of great significance. Yeah, there's a little drawing of the jaw there. Collier showed it to various English scientists, including Charles Lyell, George Busk, Richard Owen, Sir John Prestwich, and Thomas Huxley. All of them were skeptical of its antiquity. Huxley, for example, objected that the shape of the bone did not indicate it belonged to an extinct or aberrant race of mankind. Here again, we encounter the mistaken belief that a modern-looking bone cannot be genuinely old. American paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn, writing in the 1920s about Moyer's finds of flint tools in the same area where the Foxhall jaw was uncovered, wondered why the above-mentioned scientists did not take the trouble to visit the site. They disbelieved, said Osborn, probably because the shape of the jaw was not primitive. Also, the bone was not completely fossilized, but this is true of many other bones of similar age. After some time, the jaw mysteriously disappeared. It is almost never mentioned by modern authorities, and those who do mention it are invariably scornful. For example, we find in Fossil Men by Marcellin Buell this statement: "It requires a total lack of critical sense to pay any heed to such a piece of evidence as this." But many conventionally accepted bones and artifacts have also been found by uneducated workers. For example, most of the Homo erectus finds from Java were made by unsupervised, paid native collectors. And the Heidelberg Homo erectus jaw was found by German workmen whose foreman later turned it over to scientists. If scientists can seriously consider these discoveries, then why can they not seriously consider the Foxhall jaw as well? One might object that the Java Homo erectus fossils and the Heidelberg Homo erectus jaw are still available for inspection, while the Foxhall jaw has vanished. But the original Peking Homo erectus fossils disappeared from China during World War II, and yet they are still accepted as evidence for human evolution. All right. This might be the last one here. Castanedolo skeletons. Millions of years ago, during the Pliocene period, a warm sea washed the southern slopes of the Alps, depositing layers of coral and mollusks. Late in the summer of 1860, Professor Giuseppe Ragazzoni, a geologist at the Technical Institute of Brescia, traveled to Castanedolo. I can't pronounce any of these words. About 6 miles southeast of Brescia to gather fossil shells in the Pliocene strata exposed in a pit at the base of a low hill, the Calle di Vento. Ragazzoni reported, searching along a bank of coral for shells, there came into my hand the top portion of a cranium, completely filled with pieces of coral cemented with the blue-green clay characteristic of that formation. Astonished, I continued the search, and in addition to the top portion of the cranium, I found other bones of the thorax and limbs, which quite apparently belonged to an individual of the human species. Ragazzoni took the bones to geologists A. Stepani and G. Curioni. According to Ragazzoni, these guys all sound like noodles. Should I have not said that? Should we delete that part?
We'll have to go back and delete that.
Their reaction was negative. Not giving much credence to the circumstances of discovery, they expressed the opinion that the bones, instead of being those of a very ancient individual, were from a very recent burial in that terrain. I then threw the bones away, stated Ragazzoni, not without regret, because I found them lying among the coral and marine shells, appearing, despite the views of the two able scientists, as if transported by the ocean waves and covered with coral, shells, and clay. But that was not the end of the story. Ragazzoni could not get out of his mind the idea that the bones he had found belonged to a human being who lived during the Pliocene. Therefore, he wrote, I returned a little later to the same site and was able to find some more fragments of bone in the same condition as those first discovered. In 1875, Carlo Germani, on the advice of Ragazzoni, purchased land at Castanedolo for the purpose of selling the phosphate-rich shelly clay to local farmers for use as fertilizer. Ragazzoni stated, I explained to Germani about the bones I had found and strongly advised him to be vigilant while making his excavations and to show me any new human remains. In December of 1979...
I'm just like, he threw away the bones, but then he's like, hey, when you're digging, like, show me the human bones you find.
Yeah, well, he said he went back, he threw the bones away.
I know.
And then he went back and found more. And then I can't believe he threw them away. So 1979, which is 4 years later after the guy started.
This is the power of the model he has.
Throw them away. Yeah, throw them away. Sorry, not 1879. So 4 years after the guy purchased the bones and started digging the area out to use as fertilizer, Germani noticed some bones in his excavations about 15 meters or 49 feet from the place where the first human bones were found. On January the 2nd in 1880, Germani sent a message to Ragazzoni about the discoveries. Ragazzoni recalled, the next day, I went there with my assistant in order to remove the bones with my own hands. The bones included pieces of the skull, some teeth, parts of the backbone, ribs, arms, legs, and feet. More discoveries were to follow. On January 25th, Germani brought Ragazzoni some jaw fragments and teeth. These were found about 2 meters or 7 feet from the bones uncovered earlier in January. Ragazzoni returned and found more fragments of skull, jaw, backbone, and ribs, as well as some loose teeth. All of them, he said, were completely covered and penetrated by the clay and small fragments of coral and shells, which removed any suspicion that the bones were those of persons buried in graves, and on the contrary confirmed the fact of their transport by the waves of the sea. On February 16th, Germani advised Ragazzoni that a complete skeleton had been discovered. Ragazzoni journeyed to the site and supervised the excavation. The skeleton, enveloped in a mass of blue-green clay, turned out to be that of an anatomically modern human female. The complete skeleton, said Ragazzoni, was found in the middle of the layer of blue clay. The stratum of blue clay, which is over 1 meter or 3 feet thick, has preserved its uniform stratification and does not show any sign of disturbance. The skeleton was very likely deposited in a kind of marine mud and not buried at a later time, for in this case, one would have been able to to detect traces of the overlying yellow sand and the iron red clay called ferretto. So since the yellow sand and iron red stuff was not in the blue clay that it was found in, right?
Yeah.
In short, any burial would have certainly produced a noticeable mixing of different colored materials in the otherwise undisturbed blue clay layer, and Ragazzoni, a geologist, testified that there was no sign of such mixing. Also, the blue clay had its own stratification, which was intact. Ragazzoni considered another possible objection to his conclusion that the human bones were as old as the Pliocene layer in which they were found. Perhaps streams had stripped away the layers covering the blue clay and penetrated partway into the blue clay itself. The human bones could then have been washed into hollows and new material could have been deposited over them. This could explain why there were no signs of burial, but Ragazzoni said that it was unlikely that the human fossils had been washed recently into the positions in which they were found. The fossil remains discovered on January 2nd and January 25th lay at a depth of approximately 2 meters. The bones were situated at the boundary between the bank of shells and coral and the overlying blue clay.
Yeah.
They were dispersed as if scattered by the waves of the sea among the shells. The way they were situated allows one to entirely exclude any later mixing or disturbance of the strata. And he further stated, the skeleton found on the 16th of February occurred at a depth of over 1 meter in the blue clay, which appeared to have covered it in a state of slow deposition. Slow deposition of the clay, which Ragazzoni said was stratified, ruled out the hypothesis that the skeleton had recently been washed into the blue clay by a torrential stream. Modern geologists place the blue clays in the Ostian stage of the Middle Pliocene, which would give the discoveries from Castanedolo an age of about 3 to 4 million years. In 1883, Professor Giuseppe Sergi, an anatomist from the University of Rome, visited Ragazzoni and personally examined the human remains at the Technical Institute of Brescia. After studying the bones, he determined that they represented 4 individuals, an adult male, an adult female, and 2 children.
Holy crap.
Sergi also visited the site, and he wrote, I went there accompanied by Ragazzoni on the 14th of April. The trench that had been excavated in 1880 was still there, and the strata were clearly visible in their geological succession. If a hole had been excavated for a burial, then it would not have been refilled exactly as before. The clay from the upper surface layers, recognizable by its intense red color, would have been mixed in. Such discoloration and disturbance of the strata would not have escaped the notice of even an ordinary person, what to speak of a trained geologist. Sergi also noted that, except for the almost complete female skeleton, most of the bones were dispersed among the shells and coral below the blue clay, as if across a single flat surface. This supported the view that these bodies had come to rest on a shallow sea bottom. When they decayed, their bones were scattered by the action of the water. The almost entirely preserved female skeleton was not found in a posture indicating ordinary burial, but overturned, in other words, face down. Sergi was convinced that the Castanedolo skeletons were the remains of humans who had lived during the Pliocene period of the Tertiary. About the negative opinions of others, he said, the tendency to reject, by reason of theoretical preconceptions, any discoveries that can demonstrate a human presence in the Tertiary is, I believe, a kind of scientific prejudice. Natural science should be stripped of this prejudice. This prejudice was, however, not overcome, and it persists today. Sergi wrote, by means of a despotic scientific prejudice, call it what you will, every discovery of human remains in the Pliocene has been discredited. But Sergi was not alone in his acceptance of Ragazzoni's discoveries. Armand de Quatrefages, familiar to us from our review of stone implements, also accepted them. Concerning the female skeleton uncovered, he said in his book, there exists no serious reason for doubting the discovery of M. Ragazzoni, and if made at a quaternary deposit, no one would have thought of contesting its accuracy. Nothing, therefore, can be opposed to it but theoretical a priori objections. In 1889, an additional human skeleton was discovered at Castanedolo. This find introduced an element of confusion about the discoveries of 1880. Wow, this is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be.
This is incredibly interesting. Just keep going. Holy crap. Wow.
Yeah, it was a family. I mean, you caught that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
the whole time the story is developing, I'm just sitting there thinking like, man, this ancient beach or this sea, you know, why were there two bodies? Like, what was going on that meant like, two bodies were here? And and then as it develops, you realize it's a family, and it's like, man, okay, so maybe they, you know, they were on a raft or something and just didn't make it.
They didn't make it. All of them died.
Yeah, and it's and then you know, from there, it's like my mind is just like, what was this world? This is a completely different world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's the way I think of it. The creatures, so many things, so different, yet the same somehow.
Yeah,
I just
it's different.
Bad Bill and Ted reference,
same as before.
But yeah, that's man, this is amazing. Wow.
So Ragazzoni invited G. Sergi and A. Issel to examine the new skeleton, which had been found in an ancient oyster bed. Sergi reported that both he and Issel believed this new 1889 skeleton to be a recent intrusion into the Pliocene layers because the almost intact skeleton lay on its back in a fissure of the oyster bed and showed signs of having been buried. But in his own paper, maybe it's Issel went on to conclude that the 1880 discoveries were also recent burials. In a footnote, Issel claimed that Sergi agreed with him that none of the skeletons found were of Pliocene age. For the scientific community, this apparently resolved the ongoing controversy. But Sergi later wrote that Issel was mistaken. Despite his view that the 1889 skeleton was recent, Sergi said that he had never given up his conclusion that the 1880 bones were Pliocene. But the damage had been done, and Sergi was not up to fighting a new battle to rehabilitate the 1880 discoveries. Thereafter, silence or ridicule became the standard responses. A good example of the unfair treatment given to the Castanedolo finds may be found in Professor R.A.S. McAllister's Textbook of European Archaeology, written in 1921. McAllister admitted that the Castanedolo finds, whatever we may think of them, have to be treated seriously. He noted that they were unearthed by a competent geologist and examined by a competent anatomist. Still, he could not accept their Pliocene age. Faced with the uncomfortable facts, McAllister claimed, there must be something wrong somewhere. Yes. I agree.
Agreed.
First of all, the bones were anatomically modern. Now, if they really belonged to the stratum in which they were found, wrote McAllister, this would imply an extraordinarily long standstill for evolution. See, this is a big problem. Right. But you were just pointing out, like, cockroaches are standing still.
Yeah, I disagree. That's not what that means.
It is much more likely that there is something amiss with the observations. McAllister also said, the acceptance of a Pliocene date for these skeletons would create so many insoluble problems that we can hardly hesitate in choosing between the alternatives of adopting or rejecting their authenticity. So here, once again, we find a scientist's preconceived ideas about evolution influencing him to reject skeletal evidence that would otherwise be considered of good quality. McAllister cited Issel in support of his attempt to discredit all of the Castanedolo finds, even though Issel's 1889 report really discredited only the 1889 skeleton. For example, McAllister, referring to all of the Castanedolo finds, wrote, examination of the bones and their setting by Issel of Geneva revealed the fact that the strata were full of marine deposits and that everything solid within them except the human bones showed marine incrustations. While it is true that Issel reported that the bones of the skeleton uncovered in 1889 were smooth and free of incrustations, the same cannot be said of the earlier discoveries, which both Ragazzoni and Sergi said were encrusted with blue Pliocene clay and pieces of shells and coral. Another example of the unfair treatment given the Castanedolo discoveries is found in Fossil Men. In this book, Buell and Valois stated that it seems certain that at Castanedolo we are dealing with a more or less recent burial. But in Fossil Men, they devoted only one paragraph to Castanedolo and did not mention the undisturbed layers lying over the skeletons or the scattered and incomplete state of some of the skeletons, information that tends to rule out intrusive burial.
Yeah.
They noted in 1889 the discovery of a new skeleton was the subject of an official report by Professor Issel. who then observed that the various fossils from this deposit were all impregnated with salt, and with the sole exception being the human bones. Here, they imply that what was true of the bones found in 1889 was also true of the bones found previously, but in his 1889 report, Eisel described only the bones found in 1889. In fact, Eisel did not even mention the word salt, referring instead to marine incrustations, which were, as above mentioned, present on the bones found in 1860 and in 1880. Scientists have employed chemical and radiometric tests to deny a Pliocene age to the Castanedolo bones. Fresh bones contain a certain amount of nitrogen in their protein, and this tends to decrease with time. In a 1980 report, K.P. Oakley found the Castanedolo bones had a nitrogen content similar to that of bones from late Pleistocene and Holocene Italian sites, and thus concluded the Castanedolo bones were recent, but the degree of nitrogen preservation in bones can vary widely from site to site, making such comparisons unreliable as age indicators. The Castanedolo bones were found in clay, a substance known to preserve nitrogen-containing bone proteins. And bones tend to accumulate fluorine from groundwater. The Castanedolo bones had a fluorine content that Oakley considered relatively high for bones he thought were recent. Oakley explained this discrepancy by positing higher past levels of fluorine in the groundwater. But this was simply guesswork. The Castanedolo bones also had an unexpected high concentration of uranium, which is consistent with great age. A carbon-14 test yielded an age of 958 years for some of the Castanedolo bones, but as in the case of Galley Hill, the methods employed are now considered unreliable, and the bones themselves, which had been moldering in a museum for 90 years, were very likely contaminated with recent carbon, causing the test to yield a falsely young age. The case of Castanedolo demonstrates the shortcoming of the methodology employed by paleoanthropologists. The initial attribution of a Pliocene age to the discoveries of 1860 and 1880 appears justified. The finds were made by a trained geologist, G. Ragazzoni, who carefully observed the stratigraphy at the site. He especially searched for signs of intrusive burial and observed none. He duly reported his findings to his fellow scientists in scientific journals, but because the remains were modern in morphology, they came under intense negative scrutiny. As McAllister put it, there had to be something wrong. The account of human origins now dominant in the scientific community is the product of attitudes such as McAllister's. For the last century, the idea of progressive evolution of the human type from more ape-like ancestors has guided the acceptance and rejection of evidence. Evidence that contradicts the idea of human evolution is carefully screened out. Therefore, when one reads textbooks about human evolution, one may think, well, the idea of human evolution must be true because all the evidence supports it. But such textbook presentations are misleading, for it is the unquestioned belief that humans did in fact evolve from ape-like ancestors that has determined what evidence should be included and how it should be interpreted.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that was awesome. Cheers, man.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that one was, I guess I should not have done that last one there. I looked at the timer and I was like, well, I can do this last story. And it turned out to be 40 freaking pages long.
That was awesome.
Yep. There's my paper of stuff. Oh,
right there.
All right, you guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com.
No, you can't.
I mean, you can write us emails there. Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. That's got all the podcast-related stuff. And the pyramid scheme is there as well. Patreon or PayPal. Support the show however much you can. Thanks very much to everybody who has done that.
Yep.
Yeah, and thanks to Jeff, who does the Library of the Serpent and has been making t-shirts, runs the Discord. Thanks to History Shift, who makes the YouTube videos. And yeah, thanks to all you guys out there. We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.